This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 4 minutes after 10. Good morning. I hope you had a splendid weekend. I hope you remembered to put cream on. Goodness me. How long does it take you normally to wish that the weather was nicer and then start wishing that it would stop being quite so nice and return to slightly more manageable temperatures? What do you give yourself? 3 days, is it? 3.5? 2? An hour? Very wonderful, wonderful place. I moved to West London about 23 and a half years ago, actually. I can date it by my wedding day. And I remember being struck on pretty much the first time I went out shopping. I moved from a wealthy part of town to a slightly less wealthy part of town. So I'd sort of knocked around zone 1 for most of my student years and my early years in work. Do you know that you could work in a shop in central London and live in Soho when I left university? Can you imagine that? I'm sorry if I'm alienating non-Londoners, but Soho is, pretty much the coolest district in the country, and rents have always reflected that. But I was working in a shop. I was working more or less full-time in a shop while desperately trying to persuade a few newspapers to give me a bit of work. And I had more than enough income to rent a room in a nice big flat, just north of Oxford Street, actually, not quite Soho. You'd call it Fitzrovia. Now, goodness me, you couldn't rent a bench in Soho Square for an average retail income. Incredible. I mention that because we're going to talk about shops today, which, as you know, is one of my all-time favourite subjects for 2 reasons. Firstly, because they're completely universal. It is, of all the things we ever talk about, shops are almost unique in the way that we all have a relationship with them. It was Mark Twain, I think, who said that the only certainties in life are death and taxes. And I would add shops to that list. Well, at least for now. There are warnings that we could be watching a decline which I think many people listening to this are going to find almost impossible to believe. And what interests me first and foremost about that is how relevant geography is to this conversation. That's why I've started by mentioning moving essentially from Kensington to just off the Harrow Road, for those who know that neck of the woods, near Ladbroke Grove in West London. And I went shopping. I can't remember what chain it was. Would it have been in Iceland? There was an Iceland there, but I think there was another one next door. And there was security on the meat. Now, I had seen security at that point in my life, like a little security tag that would set off the gates as you left the shop. I'd seen it on smoked salmon, because smoked salmon, is a very, very high-end product. And I'm pretty sure that at this period of time, you would also get it on razor blades, the expensive razor blades, the ones that every 2.5 years come up with the absolutely revolutionary decision of adding another blade to the product and therefore completely changing the game of shaving for another 2.5 years. It must be the easiest money in the world, that. You just go along to meetings for 2 or 3 years, and at some point I don't know what they do. Do they just have a clock that's ticking? Why don't we add a 5th blade, Tristram? Yes, that will change the face of shaving for another. And then you get voiceover guy in to do a voiceover, and lo and behold, the revolutionary new addition, the revolutionary new change to the art of shaving is another blade. Benjamin Franklin, I think, Rebecca reminds me, not Mark Twain, who said death and taxes are the only certainties. I probably got Gatsby wrong at the top of the show as well when I said that description of going bankrupt involving first slowly and then quickly. Think about it. It's a beautiful description. And I think it applies to the decline of shops, because meat, right? So what, 15, 20 quid for a joint of meat? Maybe more. And that's why they had security tags on them when I moved to this slightly poorer part of town. There's no other way of describing it. I'm looking now at Nivea skin cream being in a security box in a supermarket in North London, a Co-op store in North London. Sun cream in a security box. Again, at a Co-op. The Co-op seems to have particular problems. I'm looking at a joint of pork in a security box in a branch of Iceland, and not just having a tag on it, but they're now in locked boxes, like you sometimes have alcohol in, a high-end Grey Goose, posh alcohol. There's a coffee jar that is empty So what does that mean? What does that mean? You take the empty jar. It's like buying records in Woolworths 40 years ago. You take the empty sleeve to the counter and they'll pop This is Kenco instant coffee. You take an empty jar of Kenco instant coffee to the till and they give you a full one. It's quite breathtaking. It was Scott Fitzgerald, but it was in The Sun Also Rises, according to Robert in Lewisham. Thank you, Robert. I like to get that's both of my literary illusions this morning that were completely wrong. And it's only 10:10 on Monday morning. This is going to be quite the week. Also, the first complaint that's come in. I think I heard you do this topic. What's new? I'll tell you what's new, mate. They've got shampoo now in the security boxes, and you've got the head of John Lewis saying that we need a royal commission to save our high streets, warning that they're becoming a looting ground for criminal gangs. And that's what I mean about boiling a frog. It's one of those issues. 35% has gone up in the first 6 months of this year. That's theft and antisocial behaviour in the first half of this year alone. And that is a figure that should have everybody sort of choking on their muesli this morning, because that means that there is a very real sense that some shops now are, no-go zones. And that's a phrase that the co-op has even come close to using. Some communities could become no-go areas for shops. So some parts of the country are so riddled with retail crime that the companies involved are, pulling out. There's a massive Sainsbury's in South London that employees believe is closing in part because of the levels of theft that are now being endured, the levels of theft that are now being experienced. Industry research in the UK suggests that the majority of thefts committed against retail businesses are by repeat offenders. So it's almost become a habitual behaviour. And it's Hemingway, not Scott Fitzgerald. So there we go. We got all the way. We got all the way there. Wrong author, wrong book, but we got there in the end. That's because this is a community programme. It's a crowd-funded or a crowd-sourced effort every morning. I'm sure it was Fitzgerald. Anyway, 11 minutes after 10 is the time. And I think we should do this in two ways. I think that you should shock people listening who've got no idea what it's like. But the problem with that is that it's normal where you are. So it's 23 years since I was shocked in a shop. Since I actually picked up a leg of lamb and saw that it had a security tag on it and thought to myself, goodness me, that paints a fairly grim picture of our community, that they now have to have anti-theft technology on legs of lamb. The reason why you had them on smoked salmon and razor blades was because drug addicts could go in, nick it, and then sell it in the pub for, say, half of what the retail price was, and they'd always be a relatively ready market. You may even have been offered stuff like that, but I don't think anyone's ever offered you a bottle of skin lotion or a bottle of suntan cream for a knockdown price in the pub. So why is everything dishwasher tablets in security cases at a North London co-op? So I want to try to pin down how shocking everything is, if you see what I mean. And I don't do moral panics on this programme. I leave that to 99% of the UK media. But if the head of John Lewis is using phrases like looting ground and calling for a royal commission to save the high street, to save town centres, then that's not a moral panic. That's a proper panic. That's a genuine panic. You've got other issues as well facing shopkeepers. I was talking to a shopkeeper or a shop owner who's got a place in Primrose Hill where attempts to make everything very boulevardy and promenade, so post-COVID tables and chairs in the streets everywhere, means that people can't park, which means that a lot of the passing trade is disappearing. So they're really getting it from almost every angle. But we'll focus today on the theft, really, the comprehensive plan that the head of John Lewis, Dame Sharon White, is calling for to stop the rise in thefts from stores. And that's the second part of the question, really, is what on earth can we do about it? Ferrero Rocher in a security box, secured in a case. I genuinely couldn't believe my eyes this morning. And as you know, we talk about some of these issues quite often, quite regularly. Some of this stuff pops up on the programme. But I had absolutely no idea it had reached the point where skin cream and shampoo is getting the same treatment as, well, it used to be, as I say, legs of lamb and razor blades, honey, imported cheeses, steaks. Locking up products now is commonplace. And putting empty jars on the shelves so you can take it to the till and get it full up. Michelle says, let's talk about extortionate prices and then discuss who's robbing who. No, Michelle. I'm afraid it's obvious who's robbing who. If you go into a shop and take something out of it without paying, you are the criminal, regardless of what the retail cost of the thing you're nicking may be. So, listen, two things, right? Number one, there will be people listening to this who, like me, are struggling to believe that things are as bad as they are being portrayed. So tell them what you've seen. All right? And especially if you work in retail. This notion of, what's the phrase she used? A looting ground. If you work in retail, you're going out. This is actually just real, James. Get with the programme. So call me on that, 0345 6060973. And then I want to do the why of it. What happened to create the environment, to create the atmosphere in which this has become completely commonplace behaviour? I know the obvious answer is that if you're nicking less than 200 quid, the police are not going to pursue the case or even attend. They're not even going to attend and prosecute reports of shoplifting if the value of items taken is below £200. But to be honest with you, I struggle to get my head around that as well. I struggle to get my head around the idea that decision was ever taken. I hope that doesn't sound naive. You'd have just thought that it's one of the 10 commandments, isn't it? You'd have thought that among the things you take for granted are the fact that if people are nicking stuff from shops, they're going to get their collar felt. So how have we ended up in this situation, and what exactly is the situation? Have you got people, for example, and I hope not, but it seems to me perfectly plausible, that are sort of knocking on your door and asking what you want and then going out to nick it to order for a fraction of the price that you'd pay if you were doing it in shops? It's not just endemic, it seems almost to be habitual, as if it's become the new normal. And I would like, with your help, to get to... David's seen them on frozen chips. That's in Aston Clinton. I'm not sure where that is, actually, but imagine that. There was security on a bag of chips, a bag of frozen chips. Something very, very odd has happened, and it's happened incrementally. It's happened as the old metaphor about a boiling frog happens. It's happened in tiny stages until you reach the point where profound change has been undertaken and we haven't properly clocked it because it's taken place in baby steps. If you were, go back to when you were, say, 20, 30 years ago, and you walked into a supermarket and there was security on soap, how would you respond to that? Well, exactly. That is what has happened in baby steps. I want to know what, and I want to know how. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And I guess we add on the end of that, as Sharon White calls for a royal commission, how do you save the high street? It's one of my favourite subjects, this, and you never get a definitive answer to it because nobody actually knows. Maybe you can't, but I want to begin with the crisis, the extent of it, and the roots of it. It's 10:17. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 20 minutes after 10, and as we talk about this frankly bizarre state of affairs regarding retail theft, I am going to mention another headline from today's news, which I think must be pertinent to the conversations that we're having. But it's not an excuse. It's never an excuse. And that headline is, 1 in 5 households in England will have homes costing more than a third of their income shortly. And that is the sort of dictionary definition of unaffordability. That's by the end of this decade. So without a government plan to solve the housing crisis, people are not going to be able to afford housing. Therefore, the absolute, what's the word I'm looking for? What's a better word than endemic? Plague, the levels of shoplifting that are going on now, perhaps begin to make sense. It's 20 minutes after 10. What's going on and why? Josh is in Guildford to kick things off. Josh, what have you got?
Hello, James. So I used to work for a company that looks after the one-stop stores for security systems, so like alarms, CCTV. So quite often I'd be working in the shops later at night to set the alarms and stuff, and quite often I'd see people doing what they call a beer run, go in, nick 3 crates of beer or nick 10 packets of ham. And obviously staff in these shops are told not to chase and go after
them. Why
them.
would someone nick 10 packets of ham? Sorry, I'm being stupid.
Well, obviously this was Southampton. This was a well-known drug area, so I'm assuming it's a drug addict.
So you sell ham, do you?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I wouldn't then take a pack of ham off someone. You don't know how long it's been in.
Well, I don't think I would either. But there you go. You saw what you saw. I've got a bit of beef with Southampton at the moment. While we're talking about meat in Southampton, it's the only place on my book tour that hasn't sold out, Josh. So I'm beginning to get some clues as to why that might be. If I hang out a packet of free ham instead of books, maybe I'll just tip the balance, tip the pendulum. Carry on.
Yeah, so obviously staff are told, given the money, don't chase after them. But a few times I've been the hero and chased after them. I've got the 10 packs of ham back at one point.
Well done.
But anyway, so obviously, I don't work for that company anymore, and I don't work in retail. I work elsewhere. But anyway, so over the weekend I saw a video on TikTok of a guy in a Poundland shop. He was trashing the shop by the looks of it.
Right.
I don't know where it was, and saw this member of staff. They bundled him out the door.
God.
So obviously the staff are trying to protect the shop, which I think a lot of staff know now that they've got to do something because the security measures aren't working. And apparently this member of staff has been sacked.
For not successfully, I'm always a little bit wary of getting my news from TikTok, but what you do remind me of is the proliferation of self-service checkouts. There are fewer and fewer human beings on duty in shops now, which probably adds to the issue. When would you say, briefly, the tipping point? Because I am genuinely shocked by the skin cream, but I knew about, and maybe by the dishwasher tablets as well. Because is it all being nicked to sell? Is it all going to be linked to drug addiction?
I think it's nicking to sell it to make a few pound cash, innit? Give it to someone a bit cheaper.
Yeah, no, I bet that, and that's always been there. I just can't quite see who's going to buy a bottle of skin cream off the local smackhead. That's all just probably me being very, very naive, Josh, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being naive. But who buys snide skin cream? 0345 6060 973. There's a topic we've never done before. I don't know. I hope I'm not sounding overprivileged. Gosh, James, you don't know how much it costs suntan lotion. If Dirty Gertie from number 30 is offering me a knockdown deal on a bottle of Factor 30, I'm going to bite her arm off. I just can't see it, personally. That's the bit of the story I don't get. Jane is in Derbyshire. Jane, what would you like to say?
Well, James, you are very, very, very naive. Sorry
I'm not very naive. I'm not very, very, very naive. If I was very, very, very naive, I wouldn't believe that thieving was taking place at all. But I'm very naive. Go on.
No, the facts are that 30, 40 years ago, when I grew up in a council estate in Cov, the scream used to go out for legs of lamb and packets of razor blades because they were luxuries. Sun cream isn't a luxury anymore. It's a bare essential we cannot afford anymore.
What about instant coffee? Instant coffee?
Instant coffee. Have you seen the price of instant coffee? It's insane. It's because people have got used. That's their lifestyle. I don't drink instant coffee, but their lifestyle is I sell it, and I sell it very, very cheap, but I don't buy it. Now, the reason I rang in was because I'm 55 years of age. From my experiences of growing up on council estates in Coventry and now living in the affluent Peak District, which is wonderful and beautiful. This isn't a problem that strikes us readily.
Does it not? Because it was Chiswick a couple of weeks ago. It was the leafy West London suburb of Chiswick that was being plagued by these
not in the hilly hillsides of
the hilly hillside. The hilly hillsides. You're a great one for repetition, aren't you, Jane? Go on.
I don't find it in our shop, but I get people. We run a campsite, and I get people from all over the country that come to this beautiful campsite, and the first thing they buy out of our shop is instant coffee. Because ours is Nescafe Gold, whatever, is £2.35.
Well, that's very cheap.
We buy it from the local wholesalers in Sheffield and make a 35% profit on that. We have no negotiating power to buy coffee.
But you're not making excuses for the thieves, are you? By pointing...
No, absolutely not. No. I'm giving the reasons why these. No, absolutely. God forbid.
So who's buying the instant coffee and who's selling it?
The shoplifters are selling it because they're selling it to the people who cannot afford, who have probably gone to shoplifters all their lives for their luxuries. Now the trouble is deodorant, razors, shampoo,
so where once it would have been a side of beef and 30 Mach 3 razor blades, now it's a bottle of Nivea and a jar of coffee.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's the same. But the scale and because there's so much more demand driven by poverty.
Yeah.
The supply moves into the space created. So, you're saying naive. I don't think I'm being naive. I'm just being a bit slow to join the dots together.
Possibly, yeah.
But that's all it is.
I would have been had I have only grown up in this situation I'm in now. That I would have been completely the same. But having experienced,
I've been in pubs where I've been offered razor blades and a joint of meat. But what you're saying is now the difference between a 20 quid what was a 20 quid purchase then, now 2 quid, 5 quid is too much for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I don't get it at all.
But see, this used to, where you say pub, that used to happen in my nan's house.
Did it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
every week,
a local...
every other day. The shoplifters are in.
A local geezer would take orders or come round with the ready stolen?
Oh, they come round to order and hit and miss, whatever they could get some days. But they always aim for the top of the market. They would never sell you a deodorant. You would need to buy a deodorant.
Yeah.
You've got one.
Yeah. And now it's
but
everything. Well, crikey,
I know.
there it is. So, I mean, what's the answer then? How do you claw
Deal
back?
with poverty.
Yeah. Well, then we're in a bit of a situation, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On this
Deal with crime along the way. Stop the markets. But the way you're going to stop the market is to stop the poverty.
Well, I'm glad you said that because it sounds very authentic. It is shocking, but it's also, I mean, politically quite loaded, of course. The idea that this is a consequence of austerity or inflation or all of the above, low wages, stagnation. Whew. You're right. Maybe I am very, very naive, but definitely not very, very, very naive. 10:27 is the time. Thank you, Jane. What's the name of your campsite? Sounds delightful.
Laneside Caravan Park. It's in a little village called Hope, so I live in Hope all the time, which is lovely.
I like that a lot. I live in a little village called Despair. Pierre is in Cheam. Pierre, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Yeah,
Hello.
I hope you can hear me okay. I don't know if I've got an answer, but just a few thoughts. I mean, I went to Russia as a kid with a school group in 1985. There was no shops in the USSR, so it's a weird thing. And now it's like here. I think my main point was like, is the rise of the faceless corporation got anything to do with it? Do people when you nick, is there an element of it's a write-off for them? They're so big they won't even notice it.
I think that might explain elements of it, but it doesn't explain the simple supply and demand scenario that we just heard about, does it?
And the other
go on
quick point is just that it's not just here. I mean, I had an uncle in America who was telling me I think it was in Chicago, they had an area with low income, and Walmart put a big, sorry to use the name, but could have been anyone. They put a big place there. Local places shut down, and then they had a lot of looting or just, theft, and then Walmart closed, and all these people, especially in America, who haven't got a car, are like, where do I go to buy something? So I didn't bring you a solution, I'm sorry.
Well, you did. No, we're not looking for solutions, we're looking for explanations. And to be honest with you, I think one of the phrases I say most often on this programme is that the line between explanation and excuse is often vanishingly thin. Whatever politicians may like to pretend otherwise, sometimes the explanation is very close to an excuse. And if you don't believe that, all right, just imagine that your child was 5, right, and starving. Not, Bob Geldof is going to launch a campaign starving, but just starving. Like, haven't eaten for, say, 24 hours, and there's no food in the house. And you are not getting any money until Friday, and today is Wednesday. What are you going to do? Down the food bank, right? There's a limit on how often you can visit the food bank. It doesn't matter. You can't feed your children with the Daily Mail's instructions to get a job or to pull your socks up or that you're a feckless work shall I lay about. It's not true in your case. You know that. You've just been very unlucky for the last 18 months, and you've got a hungry child on a Wednesday night and no money coming in till Friday. You live miles away from family. What are you going to do? So that's an extreme example, but I think a pertinent one, especially when you put it alongside the other story in the news today about 1 in 5 households in England being in unaffordable rent or mortgage territory by the end of the decade. So, I mean, that simple answer, you deal with poverty, you want to deal with shoplifting, you deal with poverty, is a politician's nightmare, but it doesn't mean it's not true. 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. I guess at the moment, my assembled theory would be that what we're seeing is an explosion in an already existing phenomenon. So, Emma, another story. I'm getting a lot of things like this coming in. This has always been a thing, James. It took me decades to work out the reason my nan used to get door knocks at all hours of the evening. She was fencing stuff that her family had nicked. I was always in dresses from Debenhams as a tyke. Nowadays, I see stuff on Facebook Marketplace that's obviously stolen. So we sit here perhaps using the language of a moral panic as we look at security cases containing things like sun cream. And they're not to set the alarms off either, are they? They're just to make the item so bulky that it's much harder to steal, much harder to conceal. That's why you've got dishwasher tablets. But actually, all you're seeing is a huge magnification, a huge increase in the thing that already existed, which was the bloke in the pub who was the local shoplifter. In fact, I'm getting lots of messages like this. It's your lived life, James, which makes it hard for you to believe. Coffee, sun cream, anti-aging creams, razor blades. Get yourself down to your local Wetherspoons and wait for the local shoplifter. It's been going on for decades. I worked in a cafe on a council estate and people would be waiting for them. Crikey. I guess what's taken me by surprise is the normality of it. And all that's changed, all that's become abnormal is the value of the stuff that is now being stolen because of, I'm sorry, but it is because of the cost of living crisis. If you would have bought it 10 years ago and you can't buy it now, you will instead buy it off a shoplifter. Is there another explanation for this, or have we actually had a rare moment of completely solving the mystery in the first half an hour of the programme? 10:36 is the time. 0345 6060 973. Because, of course, we haven't solved the mystery of why the shops don't clamp down on it immediately and what would actually happen when they do, or if they do. Gary is in Maidenhead. Gary, what would you like to say?
Well, morning to you, James.
Hello, mate.
We have talked before on the old chap that sleeps in the Volvo.
Okay, how are you getting on?
Up and down. Not looking forward to the winter. But,
No. Okay, I'm sorry.
But listen, a lot of your listeners are going to probably hate me for saying this, but I'm actually waiting for the shoplifter to bring me some stuff that I asked him to get.
Can I ask what stuff you've got on order?
Well, one of them is my doctor's surgery that's known me, different doctors, but I've been with them since I was 11. They've dropped me because I've got no fixed address. And I need naproxen. And the only way I can get it now, I asked this chap before, can you get me it? He says, yeah, I can get it. And he says he's got me 2 packs. I've had no medication for the last 4 weeks.
What's
and
it for?
The doctors say, because I've got no fixed address, we can't help you anymore. And I said, well, that's just... So I had a big argument with them. But and then there's other little things like the instant coffee, not the sun cream, but can I just say, when you've got no choice, because you will get people that play the system on universal credit.
Right.
And I've said it before, and you get MPs that play the system at their end.
That's true.
But universal credit, when I stopped work, and I went from $350 a week to £148 a month, less than 40 quid a week,
yeah,
you're going to end up homeless unless you've got savings. And I didn't have a lot in savings, but it was enough for me to pay for the car, and hopefully, then this was last August, and you can probably hear it in my voice, it's taking its toll out on me. But
I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm sorry to hear it in your voice. And you make a case for the inevitability of some of the stuff that we're hearing about. Can I pin down how much will you pay this fella when he turns up?
Well, I'm on tick.
Are you?
Because that £5 a packet now.
Is that
if I could get them on prescription,
yeah.
I get free prescriptions, especially now I've turned 63.
But you haven't got an address, so you can't get your free prescription. So you pay him £5 a packet, do you?
Well, that's what I'm going to be. That's what he's told me, because he says he's got hold of them.
And what is it in the shops? Do you know?
I don't know, because I would normally... the ones that I used to get a free prescription.
And what are you going to pay him? What's the normal discount, if you like, for the snide stuff, for the stolen stuff, for coffee and food and things like that?
Well, he gets me instant coffee because I've got a blow lamp in the car so I can make myself a drink.
Right. And
that's around about £1, £1.50, but
okay.
he lets me have it for around about 50p. But
so a fraction of what it costs in the shops, and I can't. I mean, all I can do for anybody listening to this with a sense of disapproval is ask them what they would do in the same circumstances. I'm sorry to hear that things aren't getting any better for you, Gary. I really am. And it is perhaps evidence of what was the name of the lovely lady with the caravan park? Was it Helen, or have I can't remember. But the lovely lady with the caravan park, I'm sure she won't object to being described like that. That very simple explanation of, if you want to fix this, you've got to fix poverty. 350 a week to 40 quid a week. How would you cope? What would you do? How tempted would you be by stolen instant coffee? It was Jane, of course. Joe's in Hope. Jane lives in Hope. Never forget that. Joe's in Southwark. Joe, Gary, take care, mate. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So I can come at this from the perspective of having worked with the police for 2 years and dealt with a lot of shoplifting cases.
Yes.
And I think there's two parts to this. And I think you're talking about one here, which is the poverty side of it. And ultimately, demand for this sort of stuff. There's buyers and sellers in any marketplace. Yeah. I think the bit you're not talking enough about is the fact that, in my experience, between 80 to 90% of the people who commit shoplifting as a crime have addiction issues, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's heroin.
We have talked about that.
Yeah, but I don't think people realise quite how. Put it this way: if you want to resolve shoplifting, you need to look at drugs legislation as well as poverty reduction measures.
Yeah. Well, you deal with the poverty, you reduce the demand. You deal with the drugs, you reduce the supply. So you can't do one without the other, because if you've got very, very high demand and no supply at all, you're going to be creating a whole heap of entirely new problems. So you mean addiction management? You mean helping people get off drugs or manage their addictions more effectively without becoming poverty-stricken and homeless? Yeah,
you've got to kind of understand that. I mean, you were asking why, for example, Nivea, why shampoo? It's as simple as, what is something that's small and compact that you can easily lift, which can be sold easily.
Even for pennies, even for 50p, even for a quid or £1.50. And that's why they're putting them in massive plastic boxes, because that makes it a lot harder to secrete about your person. So, I mean, at a show, you can't expect the chief executive of Sainsbury's to introduce drug rehabilitation programs for shoplifters. So, in the meantime, what can the shops do? Answer nothing.
Well, one of the other things I think here is that, I mean, the truth is, it's very, very difficult. But I also think that there's an element here of that when someone shoplifts and gets away with it the first, second, or third time, those 3 attempts are kind of the most pivotal moments. If they don't get caught, if they don't kind of feel punished within those kind of first 3 attempts, that generally they'll go on to do it 10, 20, 30, 40 times. It becomes a lifestyle. But you've probably witnessed it yourself, where we've kind of got a generation of shop security who aren't really, they don't really want to get involved. They don't get paid enough.
No.
They just, they're more just as a visual deterrent, but they'll let people walk out the door.
Yeah, and obviously not a very good visual deterrent, given that the British Retail Consortium estimates there were 8 million incidents in the 12 months to March. That's the one bit that perhaps doesn't make sense, in that perhaps the profits that these companies make are so huge that they factor in the losses. It used to call it shrinkage when I worked in retail, but it reaches a point where you wonder how that logic is playing out. They'd rather absorb the costs of the shoplifting than pay the costs of stopping it, because they could stop it.
Yeah, that's true. To be honest, that goes into the calculations, like you say, for any of these large stores opening. They take into account shrinkage, but what I don't think they factored in is the fact that would grow so quickly as it has, and that's partly to do with the cost of living crisis. But also, addiction rates are increasing. We've got to bear that in mind. More people than ever have addiction problems,
and you seem to be seeing the evidence of that on streets, not with antisocial behaviour and thieving, but also, of course, with rough sleeping. That's really interesting. I think that fills a gap as well, what Joe just said there towards the end. Because that figure that struck me this morning, the thing that made me think this is actually something we need to talk about again, is the 35% increase in just in the first 3 months, I think, of this year, or the first 6 months of this year. The increase in theft and antisocial behaviour in shops went up by 35%. So that's the difference between it being a manageable or even a managed loss, which gets written up in the accounts as shrinkage, and it becoming something that is pretty close to out of control. And then you have to ask yourself, what's changed in the first 6 months of this year compared to the first 6 months of last year, or the first 6 months of 2013? And the answer is going to be more and more people running out of money, more and more people turning to the local shoplifter. I am beginning to think, I didn't grow up in flipping sort of Brideshead Revisited, I didn't grow up at Chatsworth. I grew up on a very ordinary street in a very ordinary town called Kidderminster, but we didn't have the shoplifter coming around every Thursday afternoon asking what we wanted for our tea. But it turns out an awful lot of people do, and it is very much the experience now that you are seeing things on that or in that bag, that swag bag, that are what I would call and you would call pretty run-of-the-mill items as opposed to high-end luxury items. And I don't know where you go to buy. I mean, if you don't have a personal connection, you just sit waiting in a pub, or I go to a car boot sale. I don't know. I presume there must be a huge increase in the amount of people selling on the stolen goods as well. Well, there must be, because if the increase in stuff being stolen is rocketing, then the increase in stuff being sold that's stolen is rocketing, and that means that the increase in people buying stolen stuff. I wonder if you're prepared to ring me and tell me you can't quite believe that you've gone down this road. Poor old Gary was very much a victim of circumstances, although a couple of people are telling me that there are GP surgeries who will take on people of no fixed abode. It doesn't, of course, change his story about the one he was previously registered with, deciding to do away with his registration. But if you can't quite believe that you are now in the market for shoplifted goods. 0345 6060 is the number you need. It's 10:46.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:50 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A couple of stories this morning that caught my eye. One in the Observer yesterday, actually. It's been picked up by The Sun today, about plans to cut special educational needs projects by 20%, by a fifth, something that is, quite chilling in its potential impact. And another story about more than half of young people, or young workers, so people who've left full-time education, taking some form of sick leave in the past 6 months because of mental health problems. And seeing those two stories alongside each other reminded them of a letter I saw on social media last week, written by my friend and colleague Roman Kemp, which seeks to draw attention to the, I'd like to say the shortage, Roman, but I think I'm going to say the absence of proper care in the context of young people's mental health. Why did you write this letter, which is rather winningly addressed to dear government and all MPs?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, thanks so much for letting me on the show. I know there's a lot of people that will be questioning as to why I'm on here, but it is that thing of, over the last kind of 3 years, it's just over 3 years now, you'll know that my tie, especially with mental health and specifically with things like suicide, has been very close, and it's something that I've had to look into for a long time. I made last year, a couple of years ago, so documentary came out, and pushed this whole kind of narrative. And where we left at last time was on this question of you need to talk more. It needs to be asking twice if you're okay. And what I've realised over the last couple of years is I watch those numbers, of how bad is it, how many people are out there asking for help with poor mental health. I was like, my God, these numbers are going up and up and up. And at one point I thought to myself, I was like, what I'm doing must be pointless then, because and what everyone else is doing, campaigning for people, get talking, do this type of stuff. But if you flip it on its head and you realise actually the numbers getting worse is a good thing, because it means that people are recognising it more. Yep. And what we're realising is that there's more reassurance that people are going, you know what, I am suffering and now I need help. But when you look into what help is available for people, it's near on impossible now to find any help when it comes to your own mental health, especially when it comes to young children. And there was a stat that I saw that was just strange. If anything, it's just strange. And it was the government had kind of agreed to put mental health support teams. Now, mental health support teams within a school do so much more. They can help teachers, they can help parents, they also help the pupils, when faced with a mental health crisis. And the government had said, you know what, we're going to put mental health support teams within schools, and our target is going to be 36%. of schools, which I find laughable. Like,
do we know where they got that particular number from?
I think it was it kind of grew because it grew to 36%. But I just find that just so strange because surely anything with a target should be 100%. That should be anything.
So we've got 36% now. Our work here is done.
Our work here is done.
64% of schools haven't got any.
And what that creates is a lottery.
That's bizarre.
But it creates a lottery of kids that are being forgotten about. You know what I mean? Over half the kids, over 60% of kids in the UK will find themselves without any support. And what I was asking for within this letter isn't necessarily money, isn't necessarily even action right now, and put these mental health support teams in there right now. I'm simply asking for that target to change from 36% to change to 100%. And I've even said I don't need a date on it. I just need that as a promise.
Have you heard anything back yet?
Do you know what? Not from current government, not yet. And you will hear this, and you'll see other politicians now, and probably other parties. And I kind of saw it over the weekend happen a little bit, and I felt like I had to address it. This letter that I have written is off my own back.
Yes.
This isn't. I haven't looked at someone else's.
It's quite personal as well. You talk about your own experiences as a teenager.
But I've seen some political parties out there see my letter and kind of attach me to their thing. And make no mistake, this isn't me saying, oh, I support this party, I support that party. This is me just talking to, as I say, the government and MPs. Just do it.
Yes. Because it does, I mean, as you say, it send out a very, very strange message that we're aiming to help less than half or fewer than half of schools. There's two bits of the letter that hit me, Roman. The first one, you talk about being diagnosed with depression as a 15-year-old. I think that's incredibly helpful, putting it out there. Someone who, from the outside seems to have a fairly gilded existence. It's important for people to realise that none of this is rational. None of this follows any of the sort of rules that we might normally expect. And the second bit is that if a child walks into school with a broken ankle or a cut face or a physical issue, school is a place that can help them. But you walk in a state of depression or anxiety or even with suicidal ideation, then without having a mental health support team, it's possible that there's nowhere in the school for that child to turn.
Well, also, it's that thing of, the fact that nowadays, if you are showing symptoms of poor mental health, or if you are experiencing suicidal ideation, you are on a waiting list that is above 8 months now. The only way that your child or more, exactly, or the only way that your child can be seen, and we're talking about children here, the only way your child can be seen as soon as possible is if they have already attempted to take their own life, which for a lot of parents out there is too late already.
It's an utter. I mean, I think that's such a terrifying criteria, such a terrifying statistic that you almost balk at it. Because I remember the first time I discovered it, I thought, it can't be true. So call her. I thought, no, you've got that a bit wrong. You must have got your wires crossed. So we look into it, and there was one health trust at the time where it was a 14-month wait. It had been just breathtaking. What happens in that 14 months? Absolutely everything gets
exactly.
worse.
And don't get me wrong. With this letter, I've done the research. I've gone to CAMS. I've gone to NHS.
Yes,
I've gone to the schools, all of them, and it's very easy for something to be passed on. At first I thought, well, why don't we just put a lesson within schools, or why don't we just free up these waiting lists? Why don't we just put more money into it? And this is quite, it's quite honest in my opinion. I feel that anyone, like you or I, we are lost causes in this. The system is already too late for us.
Sure.
For us to be able to find that help. So what I'm asking for here is for that next generation to be able to have that support there for when they're growing up.
And you can't, I was about to say you can't really argue with that, but some people, of course, will. It's probably woke to have mental health support in schools, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, exactly. But, I also think the thing of, so many parents will agree with me on this. And people out there will agree. I think school can be one of the most traumatic times of anyone's life.
It can. Just a word on why you take this on, if you would, because you could do stuff behind the scenes, you could just look the other way, you could quietly try to put your shoulder to the wheel, but not actually draw attention to yourself in this way. What is the internal conversation you have that concludes with you saying, nah? Because there's probably people around you professionally who would rather you weren't necessarily associated 100%. With something like this. So what is it that
because
swings
I think we live in a pathetic society whereby a so-called celebrity has to write a letter to people in power to try and make something that should be done anyway get done, which I think is ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we're in a society where, and don't get me wrong, I looked at Marcus Rashford's letter when writing this, because I was like, how is that the state of affairs that we have to have a footballer to create change? What he's done is a fantastic thing.
It's bonkers.
But it's like an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah, of course.
It's crazy.
We've got to find a celebrity.
Yeah, but that's what it's like.
We've got a national emergency.
But that's what it's like.
Find me someone off the telly,
exactly.
or the radio, of course.
Yeah, no, but it's true. But do you know what I mean? Like that I think is so ironic. So there's irony in the fact that this is coming from me. When realistically, like, who am I? Martin Kemp's son who speaks on the radio. It's like, it shouldn't be like that, but unfortunately that's what we live in.
Well, and thank you for doing it to that end. I should tell you, and this has come from Julie, who's one of my most committed correspondents, and will know a lot more about this. Her son is profoundly ill. It was already Labour policy to have a mental health support worker in every school. So that's good news, and it means maybe that they're not trying to jump on your bandwagon.
It does mean maybe. It does mean maybe. But again, I will stress this. I'm just one of those people who, look, let's not chat until it's done.
Well,
right?
exactly.
Just get it done.
Yes, get it done. And I mean, for heaven's sake, you think talk is cheap, but too expensive for the 100% target to be stuck out there. Roman, thank you for doing this. And thank you for finding time to talk to us.
Of course,
today.
thank you.
I'll see you soon. Right, Roman and I usually spend time at award ceremonies where he wins things and I don't. That's generally the extent of our engagement with each other. Long may it continue. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. So there was the escaped prisoner who was caught. I went looking for him on Saturday morning because he was in my patch, he was in my part of town, and I thought to myself, what would I do if I was him? And I thought the canal, I'd go up the canal because there's quite a lot of abandoned boats in that sort of neck of the, if you go up the Grand Union heading towards Birmingham, although that's quite a stretch. And I think that's what he did. I think because that's where they more or less caught him. I must have missed him by moments. I can't believe it. There's £20,000 on the table if you could help the police catch him. So you had that. What else won't you have expected the actual Home Secretary to talk about last week? The escaped prisoner, I don't think she said anything about that. Sent out young Chalk to deal with that. There was the news that the barge, her barge was costing half, as an LBC story, that costing £500,000 already, despite the fact that it's empty and that the strain of Legionella that they found on said barge, what's it called, the Stockholm Bibby, or the Bibby Stockholm, the strain of Legionella they found was the most virulent, I think, one of the most dangerous. So you might have expected the Home Secretary to talk about that, but no. I think there was another story about how they have missed a loophole in funding laws because they're spending so much of the foreign aid budget now on looking after asylum seekers in this country and obviously not spending any on actual foreign aid, that it's fallen foul. Lewis Goodall had this story. They talked about it on the news agents. It was in the FT, but that has now backfired. You might have expected Suella Braverman to talk about that, but no. She hasn't mentioned Rwanda for a while. I forget how many millions of pounds we've given to the Rwandan government to deport precisely no asylum seekers. So you might have expected her to pop up and talk about that. Things that Suella Braverman might have had a few things to say about. Chapter 473. But no, instead she popped up, I think yesterday, to announce that she's thinking of banning a breed of dog that has been involved in an attack in which 3 people were injured, including an 11-year-old who has been described as suffering non-life-threatening injuries. I think this is the one that a clip of this did the rounds. I mean, this is the radio, so I won't obviously play it to you. But the idea of another breed of dog causing a very similar conversation to ones that we have had in the past it's sort of quite dispiriting, really, isn't it? I don't know an awful lot about so-called XL bully dogs. Are they called XL as in extra large? I presume that they are. And I don't want to have another phone in. I mean, to be fair, we haven't had one for years where you queue up to tell me it's not the dog that's the problem, it's the owner, and that they're really lovely, and you let yours babysit. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I want to try and go a little deeper into it if we can. I used to do some very interesting conversations in the area of why you want to own a dog that is potentially so vicious. Now, I used to be quite pet skeptic, you might say, certainly dog skeptic. I used to take the mickey out of dog owners on the programme. I told you last week why I stopped. It was when I got a letter off a man explaining that if it wasn't for his 2 dogs, then he doesn't think he would have coped with the loss of his wife 6 months previously. And I thought it's probably time for me to stop pointing out on the radio that if you lay still for long enough, your dog would probably eat you. I just don't know where it came from, a slightly mischievous attempt to take the mickey out of people whose affection for their dog seemed to me to be excessive. So I am no longer that person, partly because we have a dog now, but we have what is called a Labradoodle, which is a ridiculous animal, a truly ridiculous animal. It looks like a toy, and it's not a puppy. It hasn't been a puppy for a long time now, but it still garners that sort of puppyish attention when we take her out for a walk. And I really like her. I probably love her. All right. I never thought I'd be that person. I didn't have dogs growing up, none of that. But the idea when we were deciding what dog to get, the idea of thinking I'd like a really massive one that's capable of tearing a human being apart, it just didn't enter my head. And I am interested in the mindset of that, because it's tempting to think that it's all, the local scrote who's got a dog as some sort of penis substitute or status symbol and wants to prove how tough he is but it's not, It's just an odd impulse, I think, that people have. It's almost, I don't know what the equivalent would be. So I don't get that, and that's always worth exploring. 0345 6060973. What is it? Why would anybody want to own a dog? And this is a specific breed that the Home Secretary is opportunistically addressing after a clip went viral, and she had nothing to say about an actual escaped prisoner. Used to be probably the Home Secretary would be expected to pop up on telly to talk about that. Forgive me if she did and I missed it. The gap will always be filled. So they prohibited a variety of breeds last time. There was a moral panic about this. And it was probably slightly clumsy legislation. And I don't know whether you do DNA tests or how you establish that dog there is able to be banned and that dog there is not, and what if it's a crossbreed, or do you ban anyone with any DNA from a certain species? Do you see what I mean? Breed, not species. And I don't know what the law can do. So on the one hand, I'm interested in what is the difference between you and me. So when you were thinking of getting a dog, you thought, I want a massive one that can kill people. And I thought, I want a cute one that looks like a teddy bear. Is it possible that I am much more confident in my own masculinity than you are? 0345, I'm teasing slightly, but I mean, could it be that, do you think? 0345 6060973. I am confident that I could dismantle any human with my bare hands. I don't need a violent, I'm not, obviously not, I'm a massive wuss, but I don't have any worries on that score. I don't have any insecurities that would be addressed in any way by me having an enormous dog that's capable of killing people. And of course, the other call I used to get would be the one pointing out that other dogs that we consider to be very friendly or very domestic are also capable of hurting people very, very badly, should the mood take them, should the provocation be in place. So I don't want to go down that lazy route either. I want to ask, actually, whether banning dogs is stupid. 0345 6060973. Whether it is actually a knee-jerk reaction. For the record, I used to be very much in favour of it. I used to think when you saw it was pit bulls, wasn't it, that caused a particular type, I think an American pit bull and some others. But if you accept that an Alsatian or a Labrador can cause terrible damage to a child, or worse, in some circumstances, then all you're talking about is a gradient of risk. So you have a statistical record of risk that tells you all dogs can be dangerous. Even my dog could be dangerous. It would just be a nip. I don't think she could do you any lasting harm, but, you know, all dogs can be dangerous, right? So you've got a gradient of risk statistically plotted to show that this dog is more likely than that dog to go rogue or to attack a human. But every dog is capable of attacking a human. And then you've got another gradient of power and heft. So if you got attacked by my dog, you'd come away grazed. If you got attacked by that dog over there, which has never harmed a fly in its life, but for some reason had a rush of blood to the thread last Tuesday and went after your Auntie Doris, it could have taken Auntie Doris's arm off. So you've got two gradients. You've got a gradient of risk and you've got a gradient of power. And the idea that you have legislation based on sticking a pin in both of those gradients just seems to me to be, at 12 minutes after 11 this morning, it seems to me to be a slightly more silly proposition, or potentially silly proposition, than I've always seen it as in the past. I often quote a rather splendid book called How Not to Be Wrong, The Art of Changing Your Mind, which opens with the line, there is no point having a mind if you never change it. And I think of all the subjects I enjoy revisiting, the ones where I was most certain of my previous position are probably my favourite. So I used to get right on my high horse about this. And I still might. But right now, probably because I hold Suella Braverman in such low regard. I think she's such an awful politician, such an unspeakable human being, so vile and so callous and so cruel, so performatively obnoxious, that if she's doing something, I think it's almost certainly the wrong thing. Now, luckily, Ian Duncan Smith is in the news today, being right about China. So what Ian Duncan Smith reminds us of is the fact that even a stopped clock is right twice a day. So I agree with Ian Duncan Smith about China, even though I think he's been wrong about absolutely everything else ever, frankly. And possibly Suella Braverman is right about this. She's having a touch of the Duncan Smiths, and she's happened to be accidentally right about this, despite the fact that she's categorically and quite egregiously wrong about almost everything else. But then I started thinking about these graphs. No one had ever explained it to me like that before. I don't know where the thought came from. But you've got 100 dogs, 100 different breeds of dog, and they're plotted on a graph going upwards in terms of risk, with risk of that dog attacking being the 100th dog is the one most likely to attack a human being. And then you've got the same 100 dogs on a plot of heft and power or weight or aggression. I don't know if that is helpful. And the 100th dog there is the one that is most violent, most vicious. Obviously, if it's a tiny little Labradoodle that attacks its own shadow, it's not that bad. Even though it's the most violent dog, it's got no power. But how feasible, and everyone that rings into this programme today is going to know more about dogs than I do, I think. Because I wonder genuinely now how feasible it is to ban breeds of dogs. Feasible stroke wise, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Okay, it's 11:15.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
17 minutes after 11 is the time. And I'm just wondering, frankly, for the very first time, I hope I don't owe you an apology if you rang in about this a few years ago and got your head bitten off, whether or not banning breeds of dogs is the wrong response to stories, tragic stories of dogs attacking and in some cases, of course, killing humans. Because, well, I've explained why. And I am going to refer back, I suspect, to the notion of two graphs. One plotting the likelihood of a dog attacking a human or another dog, actually. Richard, who's a listener to the programme, has just sent me a terrible account from the Daily Record of what happened to him when his dog was attacked. His little King Charles was attacked by two other dogs and killed. The owner of the dogs received a punishment, but the dogs are still around. They've all been ordered to be kept muzzled and on a lead for the rest of their lives when they are outside. But they killed a pensioner's beloved King Charles Spaniel. And I think the pensioner concerned is Richard, who's just texted me the story, but says he's still terrified of big dogs. And No, son-in-law. Richard's the son-in-law of the pensioner who owned a dog, and still can't really bring himself to talk about it, which I completely understand. So how there he is. They don't need to keep repeating the question. It's pretty straightforward. How mad is it to think, or how feasible, how wise is it to think that you can ban certain breeds of dogs when perhaps the answer is making owning any dog a little bit more rigorous? James is in Camberley. James, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I've grown up around dogs all my life.
Yeah.
But my niece last year has just bought an XL. It's about 6 months old now,
Right.
and believe me, it's massive.
Well,
If it attacks you,
Yeah.
you're not stopping it. No way.
Is it a new thing? Why haven't we heard about them before? Well, I mean, not before, but last time we talked.
Because they banned the last the last lot of dogs. They're just going to keep mixing dogs to get a big dog.
So what is this a mix of? Do we know?
Well, it's a mix of the one that was banned last time and a staff. That's what it is.
How is it so much big? So we've got American Pit Bulls, Japanese Tosers, Doga Argentinos, and Fila Brasileiros that are banned.
Yeah.
There's some. What?
It's an American Pit Bull staff. That's what it is.
Right. So I mean, it's just a. Why is it so much bigger than both American?
I don't understand what they're doing. They must be pumping something into them. But
they can't be pumping stuff into them.
You know what I mean? They're massive. When I say this dog is 6 months old,
yeah,
I'll visit. She's in a flat,
right?
Yeah, on the 6th floor. She's got 4 kids. I've said they're all sharing in this flat.
Right.
I said if one of the kids falls over in the flat, imagine the dog's not been out for a couple of hours. It's boiling hot. Yeah. The dog's laying about on the floor.
Yeah.
Kid trips over the dog. The dog turns on the kid.
Stop it! I know.
I said you're not stopping it. You're not stopping it. I told her. I said to her, or in the lift. You're in the lift. The dog gets uncomfortable. It's all it takes.
Yeah,
I've been around dogs. I've been bitten by a dog myself.
70% of I didn't know that. The 70% of is it attacks or deaths are the same. All dog-related deaths. It's the American Bully has been responsible for more than 70% of all
100%.
dog-related deaths in the UK since 2021. So, if she was here and I said, "Why do you want that dog? Why didn't you get a nice little poodle?" What would she say?
Because it's a statement. It's a statement.
What's it saying?
It's saying you can't come near me. I've got a big dog. I've got a dog that will have you if you come near me.
It's also saying I don't really care much about my children's safety.
They don't care. If John gets a dog, then Bill wants the dog. It's just an accessory, basically. These drug dealers and all that. I'm not saying she's a drug dealer, but I'm just saying these drug dealers and things like that. If they've got one of them in their house, the police are more, they're not going to break the door down so quick. Give them a chance to get rid of stuff and stuff.
And when you made the point about her children, what was her response?
Oh, he's lovely. Look at him. He's laying all over him now and all that. And I said, but if he turns, you're never going to stop that dog.
So we're going to. So I'm just going back to my graphs then, James. You're going to ban all dogs of a certain size, then, are you?
Look, I work in social housing.
Right.
I visit a lot of properties, a lot of flats, and I believe, if I was in charge of this country, I would say no one in a flat can have a dog over a certain size. It has to be a toy dog.
But people in a big house can.
Well, not so much these heavy dogs, not so much these ones. They've got to be well trained.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, does it? You sound like your niece now.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that dog should be banned.
But because of its size.
Because of its violence.
But it hasn't been violent.
Every dog will turn.
Which means we should ban all dogs.
Well, no, because a little nip from a little nip Jack Russell's not going to do you much damage.
So we're going to ban all big dogs. I'm kind of playing with you because I do think that it's.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. It's very controversial, but you've got to get to the root of it, and it's America is the root of it.
No, I was once in favour. When they banned these 4, I was all for it. But the more I think about it, the more you're just pressing pause until something new comes along, and then you ban that as well, and you wait 6 months and something new comes along, and you wait a year and something new comes. So banning them, I don't know what the answer is. It could be one of those. Maybe there's no answer. Maybe there's no.
You've got to legislate.
Go on.
Weight and style of a dog. Weight and style of a dog. Legislate that dog cannot be one in a flat.
You're never going to get that by. You're never going to get that by.
It's got to happen. It's got to happen. We're just going to carry on down the same road. Got to stop copying America.
I was in a flat in Knightsbridge not long ago. It's the size of 2 football pitches.
Well, but you haven't got outside space, have you?
Well, they have actually, but I'm being a bit unhelpful. I know what you mean. So a relationship. So we got licenses. You get a dog. Bring back dog licenses, and one of the things they check is the amount of square footage that you have compared to the size of your dog. I mean, it makes sense. It makes as much sense as the sort of knee-jerk reaction that Suella Braverman is talking about, but I can't quite see it landing. And there it is. I mean, it's a status symbol. That's where I do sound. That's 2 topics today where I sound a little bit, I don't know what the word is. Sheltered, is that the correct word? Did you know no one has offered me a packet of sun cream in my local hostelry anytime soon? Good Lord, what a strange phenomenon. And similarly, I'm trying to think who's got the biggest dog out of people I know. See, I got friends that go hunting. Not fox hunting, but, grouse bird shooting and stuff. I don't like all of that, but their dogs are incredibly well trained. But they're still quite big dogs. Soft mouths. They train them to pick up the bird. And so I can't quite see this anymore. I used to think it was pretty straightforward. Martin's in St Asaph in North Wales. Martin, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I was going to just tell you about something that happened to us.
Go on.
Our family dog attacked our daughter a couple of years ago now. My daughter was about 5.
Right.
The dog was what I would describe as great with kids. Docile, nice. It's a Staffy Whippet cross.
Right.
But I don't like to sort of jump to conclusions based on that, really.
No.
But what happened? The dog was sat next to me on the sofa at home, which could have been part of the problem.
Right.
And my daughter approached the dog, as she does all the time, to give it a cuddle. And she sort of made a high-pitched noise. The dog's name is Rio. She sort of went to the dog and went, Rio, and approached her face. And it wasn't, sometimes kids are clumsy. They accidentally, step on the dog's toe or poke it in the eye.
Well, so do adults.
It wasn't that. This dog launched into an attack,
no.
snarling, baring teeth, bit her in the face, and got a tooth went through her top lip, another tooth went through her bottom lip, but it wasn't a snap. It was a sustained attack. It was awful. We sat there. I was stunned. My head could not compute what I was seeing.
Yeah.
Because it's the family dog. It's little Rio, sweet little Rio. I've seen my daughter, her friends had played with the dog. They dress the dog up. They give it treats. They play puppies with the dog. But now it's it could have ripped her face off. And what I took from this is I think you mentioned it earlier. Any dog can be triggered, right? And
yes.
I don't care how much you trust that dog, right?
But this is the trade-off, isn't it? This is the sort of cost-benefit ratio. No one's going to ring up today and say we need to ban all dogs.
No.
And therefore,
we still got the dog.
So
we still got the dog.
You kept the dog.
We kept the dog, which when
that's going to surprise a lot of people. That's going to surprise a lot of people.
I mean, I lost a little bit of love for that dog that day. Do you know what I mean? I can't look at the dog the same way, really. But my daughter forgave the dog straight away, which taught me a lesson in. I don't know what the lesson is, but it taught me something that perhaps we forgive the dog. But, I mean, we've changed a lot of things now. The dog is not allowed on the sofa.
Oh, okay.
Until after my daughter's gone to bed.
I'm not going to lie to you, mate. I'm pretty shocked. I'm pretty shocked by that. I'm just imagining, because I've got daughters as well, and I think if a big dog went for my daughter, that's sayonara.
But I think there was no more chance of the dog attacking my child again because it's already done it. I think the chance is the same whether it's done it or not already. Okay, so
I understand what you're saying. So you're taking a very cool.
It's still 1 in a million.
Yeah. Okay. I think I do. I mean, it's not a shark getting a taste for blood, getting a taste for human blood or something like that. I hope.
That's what the police receptionist said to me.
Is it?
Oh, once they've had a taste for blood, mate. Oh, which I think is.
Did it not give you pause? Pardon the pun.
Well, you know what, though? You know what I think could happen here is I think you could assess each breed on risk and severity. Okay?
But then you get a crossbreed like yours, and you're ducking.
Yeah, true. true. But you could sort of say certain breeds must be muzzled in public, right?
Yeah.
That, I think, is easy to police.
You don't muzzle yours at home?
Not anymore. We did for a while, but now the dog's ill. It's got a spine problem. It's
right.
we make we manage the behaviour differently now. And I spoke to the vet about what could have caused it, what could have triggered it.
So no, you haven't been irresponsible then. You've made a decision that many people listening will struggle with, but you haven't entered into it casually or blindly, and I guess there's also a sense that your daughter wouldn't want to be responsible for the disappearance or even the death of the family pet. Crikey, I was not expecting that. That was a twist in the tale, wasn't it? But I'm glad it wasn't worse, frankly, and that she's recovered. It's coming up to past. So there it is, you see. Great calls there, covering a couple of angles, highlighting the heart of my thesis. I've never had a thesis before on the question of dangerous dogs. I've always been a little bit knee-jerk. Ban them! And yet, you ban them all. No one's in favour of that. Don't even ring me to pretend that you're in favour of that, just to get your face on the radio. No one is in favour of banning all dogs, including my little teddy bear. Or you ban no dogs, right? Which seems at first glance to be ridiculous. Then you speak to someone like Martin, who has experience of the worst nightmare, or a step towards the worst nightmare of a family dog scenario, but kept the dog. So we're not going to ban all dogs, ban no dogs, or ban some dogs. And then how do you decide which dogs get banned? Oh, well, this one here is particularly... But that's what they said about the last lot. The last 4. An XL. A lot of people talking about sofas. Never let dogs on sofas, apparently. I'm just passing that on. I'm just a messenger. I don't know. Our dog sits on the sofa. Looks like a cushion. 11:30 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So I've got 2 graphs, one of which tracks the potential violence of an animal. So I can tell you that over 70% of deaths caused by dogs in the UK since 2021 have been caused by the same breed of dog. It's called an American Bully, which is just a sort of turbocharged, larger version of the American Bulldog, bred for size. So you get 2 particularly big examples of it and breed from them. And then ideally, if this is what you're after, all the puppies will be bigger than average. And so it continues. And the other graph has got size, heft, power, damage. If it's like top trumps, it would be a score. I don't know if you ever played top trumps, but you could have top trumps of tanks, military vehicles, and it would be speed. So the ones that had the biggest firepower were sometimes slowest. So you just would choose a category and then say firepower 80% and hope that your mate had got a nippy vehicle that didn't have big firepower, and you'd nick his card, you'd win his card. So if we were playing top trumps with dangerous dogs, I've only got 2 categories. One is damage potential damage done by dog, which is going to be linked to size, teeth, weight, and the other one is simply the breed. And what how do you decide which ones you're going to get rid of? 0345 6060 973. Sophie's in Manor Park. Sophie, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Hello. I've got 3 dogs. I've got a Chihuahua.
Yeah.
3. I've got a Chihuahua, and I'd say he was the worst. And I've got a Bull Mastiff half staff and an XL Bully part Shar Pei. Okay?
Right.
And I truly believe that it is about how you train your dog, how you let your dog live around you. And basically, I just don't believe that a dog should be put down for his size. I understand about the strength of these dogs and...
Why don't you have 3 Chihuahuas?
Oh no, the Chihuahua is the worst.
Yeah, I know, but if the Chihuahua turns on you, you're barely going to notice.
Yeah, that's what you think, but like some of my friends, I can understand where the jaw is going to be locking on and things like that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I do truly believe that you can have dogs around, whatever the breed is, and it is about you as the owner. It really is. Look, your last caller, not saying it was a terrible thing that happened. Like, he turned around and said that his older children or the oldest ones dressed up the dog, and that was fine, and the dog never reacted. And yet when the younger sibling went in and tried to come up to the dog actually bit her. Now, for me, like with my children and everything, if it's a hot day and whatever, leave the dog alone. You just put certain boundaries in place. Also,
but you're talking about your dogs. What about the dogs that are not with responsible owners but are lethal?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but what do we do about them?
Exactly.
Hey?
And this is the problem.
I ask you a question.
James,
you can't answer it by saying exactly.
No, James, let me finish. My 3 dogs weren't bought. I never bought my dogs from a shop or anything.
No.
I got my dogs from people that, the XL Bully Part Shar-Pei was because it wasn't being treated right in a home.
No, okay.
The same with the bull. You see where I'm coming from?
Well,
so these dogs are actually, these dogs are out here with irresponsible breeders, and then they go to irresponsible owners. You know, some people are just selling these dogs, whatever it could be, an XL Bully or a
How big is the XL Bully cross?
He's about the size of, well, if you think of a Shar-Pei.
I don't know what a Shar-Pei is. Let me look it up. You keep talking.
They're quite cute. But basically, they're quite big as well. But he's about the same size as my Bull Mastiff Part Staff. And if you look at the
give me another example. What's the size of a small donkey? Give me some...
Oh, no, smaller than that. I think a little bit smaller than that. But, you know, they are quite hench. They are quite hench.
That means hefty, does it?
Solid.
Hefty.
Yeah. They're quite, solid.
Every day's a school day. Yeah. I mean, you're bringing back the old me where I'd be a bit rude to you and say, why do you own a dog like that? But I don't know that... I know you do understand, and I don't know that the arguments are helpful, really, because if you choose these breeds today, there'll just be some new breeds around tomorrow, won't there?
I know, I do understand, but I didn't get my dogs from a breeder.
No, I know you didn't.
Over the couple of years, and I got them independently at different stages.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just I saw the dogs in a dilemma. I didn't like what I saw, and I took them on board. Now, if you think of the situation where Marley, that's the XL Bully Staff, come from, probably I would have been more disciplined with him because I thought he will react because he's an anxious dog or whatever. But I do feel it's about the owner and what boundaries they put in place.
Yeah, and there's no way of policing that, though, is there? That's the only problem.
Absolutely.
You're doing it again.
Problem.
You can't. Well, exactly.
This is what I'm saying. There's no answer to it, James, because there are people out there. You could say the same with politicians. Like,
there is no answer
at the end
to
of the day, there is no answer to it.
Well, that's the nightmare. That's kryptonite for phone-in hosts. You can't have topics where everyone agrees there's no answer to it. Otherwise, I'm out of a job, Sophie.
You're not going to get an answer, James. I'll be honest with you.
You might be right. Well, you might. Well, Keir Starmer's chucked his oar in now, if that's the correct term of phrase. We can have a little listen to this. So it's not just Suella Braverman now that I am accusing of slightly lazy knee-jerk politics. It's also the Labour leader.
I think it's a strong case for banning this breed of dog, and I think anybody who's seen the footage would be shocked by that. Nobody should feel comfortable in relation to it. I want to see what the government is going to put forward. I hope we can do this speedily and constructively, but I don't think anybody looking at that footage could simply sit back and say nothing needs to change here. Clearly, there needs to be change.
And maybe that's it. Maybe the corollary of what I'm saying is that, of course, you ban some dogs, and then when another one comes along to fill the space vacated by the dog you banned last time, you ban another dog. And in the great scheme of things, you are chipping away, or it's a bit like painting the fourth bridge, but at least the fourth bridge is painted, even if you have to start again as soon as you finish. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of how you decide which ones get done, one video of one dog going berserk seems to me to be a little bit knee-jerk, is the phrase I keep coming back for. But I could easily be wrong. Dog licences, a lot of people are suggesting, they went out. They've still got them in Northern Ireland. I don't know if you knew that. But the reason why they don't exist in Scotland, England and Wales anymore is, I think, because they just became obsolete insofar as everybody so many people ignored the requirement to have a dog licence that it almost became pointless having a dog licence. But that doesn't mean you couldn't bring it back and just be a heck of a lot more robust about it. Georgina is in the Lake District. Georgina, what would you like to say?
I'm kind of in agreement with the last lady. I do think you have to look at the other end of the lead.
No, I know that. I know. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you quite so immediately, but I get that. But it doesn't solve the problem, does it, of a dog going?
No. So, in my opinion,
yes.
Moving forward,
yes,
what should be done is dog licensing. But in order to obtain a dog licence, you have to go through a series of practice, almost like a driving licence. So you would have to take courses and educate yourself on how to look after a dog. And I think this is the biggest problem. When you have a dog, a lot of people get these dogs and try and scoop them up and carry them there like they're little bear babies. But you need to understand the dog mentality, the way a dog thinks. So, like, I've had Rottweilers all my life. Currently, I don't own any dogs, but I've had Rottweilers all my life.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough that when I bought my dog, I went to an absolutely wonderful lady who worked for the Kennel Club who taught me how to deal with my dog. So she taught me the way the dog's thinking process. So when me and my children walked through the door, lots of people put their dog on the lead, leads them out the door. Well, that's wrong. You're supposed to let the dog hold back, the family walks through the door first, and the dog goes last, because you're allowing that dog to understand the hierarchy of its position in that home.
Okay, no, I mean, all of this makes sense. I don't know how feasible it is. I mean, how many dogs are there in the UK? Any idea?
Oh, I haven't a clue.
Nor have I. What are you going to do? So have retrospective lessons and licensing for all of them, or are we just going to go after the new ones?
I do think you have to understand the dog comes from, all the dog breeds come from the same type of thought thinking. And I think if people are taught how to deal with the general process of how dogs think and the way they would live in the wild and bring that back to reality.
No, it's never going to work. You're never going to be. I mean, you've got people going, get lost. I'm not going. But some people think they're brilliant already. It's just like cars, isn't it? You know, we've got compulsory car licenses. It doesn't stop people joyriding. Yeah, maybe. So your logic leads you to being opposed to any ban on any dog.
See, the thing is, I personally think there should be a ban on people. I think it's the people that are causing the issues with the dogs.
Well, who's going to own the dogs if there aren't any people?
It is the calibre of people that want to own these
Who's
bullies.
going to feed the dogs if there aren't any people?
No, understandably, but if there's not a demand for the dogs, the breeders stop breeding. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah,
and at the end of the day, you have to understand that the type of people that want these big bully dogs are the type of people that are not going to treat them correctly and not going to train them correctly.
Well, except for Sophie, who we just spoke to. So there always are some owners of these dogs who sound like model dog owners, or even reluctant one. I don't quite know here. Nick in the Wirral has piqued my interest. I'd like to know a little more about this. James, we've been stuck with an XL bully. It's like having a loaded gun in your house. But of course, hop over the pond to America. People think you're weird, or lots of people think you're weird if you don't have a loaded gun in your house. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:48 is the time. I think that there is a grave danger, isn't there, of the something must be done school of thought. Politicians can be forgiven for falling into it. I think perhaps the worst example was the time, was it Ed Balls intervened to get rid of the head of social services, a tragic death of a child. But the idea that the correct response to that is to fire someone whose track record, I think, as a senior social worker had previously been pretty impressive. I may have got the facts wrong on that, but when the clamour starts, for a politician to ignore the clamour is probably the best course, but sometimes it's impossible. So you now have the Home Secretary and the Leader of the Opposition backing a ban upon a specific breed of dog, an XL bully, as a consequence of a viral video clip in which one example of this breed went haywire and attacked 3 people. However, then you read that over 70% are killings, and it'll be a relatively small number of killings, so the percentage sounds a lot more striking perhaps than the total number would, but 70% of all dog-related deaths have been caused by the same dog, the larger American bully. So you sort of think, well, maybe that's where the graph goes. But that means you wait. So a new breed comes along. You wait until it is responsible for say, 70% of all dog-related deaths, and then you ban that. And because that seems a little bit reductivist, I've been arguing all morning that banning dogs is ridiculous. But is it, actually? You ban that. A lot of you are pointing out, it sounds like a conversation about legal highs. And a legal high comes along, you ban it, and then another one comes along, and then you ban that. You never actually get rid of the problem of legal highs. But by doing this with dogs, don't you reduce the likelihood of another dog attack until the new one has come along to replace the old one? So you have little windows where the statistics come down, and you could make quite a strong case, pragmatically, for that being good policy making. So I wonder whether some of this conversation sees us letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's 10 to 12. Wendy's in Lewisham. Wendy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I don't think there's enough time for us to cover this properly. I'm a behaviorist, and this is what I've been focusing on for some while now. It's a huge problem. Huge problem. Banning,
you're specifically, right. What's a huge problem specifically?
Okay. It is a social problem.
Yeah.
Banning the breed is not going to solve the problem. Will it help? We would hope so.
Yes.
We would hope so. We would hope that law enforcement will take a little bit more interest, okay?
Yes.
But the problem is a social, economic problem. And also, law enforcement need to be educated. They need to be educated and trained in order to deal with this. And let me tell you, my friend, this is a huge problem. I've seen these dogs in action. They're extremely powerful. Now, you're right. You know, all dogs are capable of damage. Okay, I've seen a golden retriever nearly take the arm off of a woman.
Yes.
Okay, so
but that's
listen,
my graph again, isn't it? So that's percentages. That's likelihood. So golden retrievers are, in newspaper terms, we say man bites dog is news, but dog bites man is not news. Golden retriever attacks human is newsworthy. XL bully attacks human is considerably less newsworthy. It happens a lot more in percentage terms.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, honestly, I could spend hours talking with you, and I'd love to. I want to help.
Right.
But like I said, this is not a straightforward issue. This is not a black and white issue.
Feel free to make a substantive contribution instead of telling us what an enormous issue it is and how hard it is to make substantive contributions.
Well, what needs to happen, in my opinion, is that a team of professionals need to come together and come up with a solution for this problem, because these dogs are here and they're here to stay.
And even if they're not here to stay, even if you do ban them, then it will be a few years before we're talking about another breed of dog that we haven't previously heard of. I am leaning towards the idea that is better than nothing, actually. So I'm slightly shifting in my position on this, but I while recognising the long-term futility of it. But Wendy's right, you probably need some sort of intervention. You need a bit more government, which you're unlikely to get while the Tufton Street vampires have still got their fangs in the neck of the cabinet. It is 11:53. Gareth is in Birmingham. Gareth, what would you like to say?
Yeah, so in a previous life, I was a watch commander on a technical rescue station, fire service, and we were given the job of breaking into cannabis farms for police.
Oh.
Because of our equipment, and they quite often used these sort of dogs to guard the premises.
Oh God, yeah. I didn't
so
know
we
that.
had we had training off a police officer his speciality was these dogs.
Right.
And essentially, these dogs it's not the size and power of the dog; it's the inherent trait. These dogs were bred to take down bulls.
Some dogs were. I don't know that the XL... Oh, is that why it's called a bull terrier? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was close. I nearly made a bit of a mistake there.
Yeah. So when they were kicked by the bull, it didn't deter them from attacking the bull.
Right.
It would just get them more riled up. Okay. It's the same reason you see border collies herding sheep and not Labradors. Each dog's got an inherent trait.
But they're bred out, aren't they? They find a trait that you want to kind of develop, and you breed it accordingly. So where do you stand on the do you ban them then? Because an inherent trait is quite hard to pin down. Yeah, but
just
go on.
Just an analogy you used was the amount of pain they can withstand is immense. So he said if you get 10 Cocker Spaniels and 10 toddlers, He said, and you get a toddlers to pinch their nose, you'll get 10 kids with bitten hands.
Right.
He said if you did the same to a pit bull,
yeah,
he said you get 9 toddlers without bitten hands and one with his head ripped off.
Right.
That's the analogy he used. And anecdotally as well, if a dog goes for you, one of these dogs goes for you, the thing to do is to stop it moving its head. So you can kick it all you like, and I've actually done this.
Okay.
You can kick it all you like, it will not let go. What it tries to do is it tries to rag your arm or your leg.
Oh, yeah.
That's what causes the damage. So what you do is you get on top of the dog, and you stop the head from moving,
right.
And then you stick something up its backside,
really?
And that'll make it let go.
Well, I think it would me.
So I just might have saved a few people out there just by giving them that bit of advice. And I don't really stand anywhere on that argument. I mean, how do you ban a bull?
Well, I was going to ask you that because I love that thing. I mean, presuming it's true about the 9 out of 10 are not actually going to go for you, but the one that does is going to go for you on a scale that is.
And do you know what, James? It's why some of these people infuriate me. And they say it's the owner, not the dog.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can train a dog really well,
but it's still a wild animal.
Like one of your previous callers said, it's still a wild animal. You can't let
domesticated wild animal. No, I think that is often a way of people reassuring themselves that their dog's okay, and they are good and responsible owners, but they want to reassure themselves that this could never happen to them. We all put quite a lot of energy into reassuring ourselves that this could never happen to them, but it could. That's the bottom line. The bottom line, it could. You could be the most responsible, brilliant pet owner in the world, but you know the circumstances could conspire to create a scenario in which your dog went for you. But banning them just seems a bit kind of meh, doesn't it? It's like, all right, we banned that today. What are we going to do tomorrow when another one comes along? A new one.
Well, I don't know what the answer is.
Do you like dogs?
Oh, I've got dogs. I've always had dogs. I absolutely love them.
And it didn't.
Think about it. It's a little bit like the gun control debate in America. Isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is a bit like that, actually. Except that I think most of us in this country, at least, could live with the abolition of guns, or at least making owning a gun much harder than it currently is. Whereas doing that with dogs would be a different proposition entirely. And did having to deal with these sort of nightmare dogs, did it affect your attitude to your own dogs at all?
Yeah, so I've got an Irish Terrier, and he's well capable of hurting somebody, but I just don't let it anywhere near a kid.
No, there is that. They weren't bred to attack Irish. They weren't bred to attack Irish people, were they? Otherwise, I'm not going anywhere near it either. I'm just checking on the nomenclature of dogs. A bull terrier bred to attack bulls, an Irish terrier. I wouldn't put it past the English over the last couple of 100 years. 11:57 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Don't cancel me. I'm just having a bit of fun. Take care, Gareth. Last word on this, I think, to Sally, who's in Holyport. Sally, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good morning. I'm so excited.
Well, so it's going to be a massive anticlimax. I can only apologise in advance.
I can't believe I'm talking to you. I'm so excited.
Well, I can't believe I just talked about having things put up bottoms with the last fella. So everyone's in a state. We're going to run out of time. Hurry up. Say what you have to say.
Quick. Okay, so got a dog on the table at the moment. Toy breed. Bred. What's it bred to do? Oh, my God, it's bred to give me affection, attention, sit on my lap, do everything I want it to do. You've got to ban the breed. You've got to do it for the reason it was bred. What was it bred to do? What's its job? What's it been bred to do? It's hardwired into its DNA to fight. It's going to do it at some point.
But then we're going to ban Alsatians, aren't we? And Dobermans.
No. The Alsatians are pastoral. Dobermans are working. It's what's hardwired to the DNA. What's it bred to do? What's its job? You don't. Just like the other guy was saying. You don't need to teach a pointer to point, it will just do it. You don't need to teach a Springer Spaniel to flush, it will just do it. They've all got a job to do. They're bred hardwired into them. You do not want to own a dog.
So how many breeds are you banning? How many breeds are you banning then?
Well, we've got them all on the list at the minute. We've got but this XL Bully, God, it's got a lot of them banned breeds in it, hasn't it?
Well, what is an Irish Terrier bred to do?
Irish Terrier is... oh God, I'm not an expert. I just know.
Well, how are you going to? You can't go around banning things without being an expert.
No, hang on a minute.
I'm hanging on.
It comes under the terrier. Yeah, it comes under terrier group. Well, it's something to do with
what?
Eating something.
Eating something. What?
Yeah, what's it going to be?
I don't know.
Terrier. Manchester Terrier. What do terriers like doing?
Rats.
Ratting,
They go after rats.
Ratting.
Ratting. Yeah, but that's being bred to kill.
It. Yeah, another animal.
Well, what's a bull? What's a bull? A bull's another animal.
Yeah, but do you want to be at the end of a terrier or at the end of an XL bully?
That's not the point. The point was you said we've got to ban all the dogs that are bred to attack animals, and I pointed out to you that
bred to fight,
bred to fight other animals.
And what you were saying, what you were saying earlier was really good as well. You're looking at,
you're just sucking up to me now.
How's it built?
Yeah, but then you've taken it.
Pound per pressure.
Pound per pressure. That's a good one. That'd be on top trumps per jaw.
Yeah, that come from the wolf.
Okay, so you could, if you were going to do a ban, it would be pretty hardcore and pretty far-reaching, but, it would involve people being alive who would otherwise be dead, and we're kind of, in some ways, back where we started. Thank you, Sally, great stuff. That didn't live up to expectations, that call, did it? You were so excited at the beginning. Was it
so excited.
Was it?
You really took me on, didn't you? And my brain couldn't think fast enough on the terrier.
But that's all right, that's how it works.
Yeah, so many breeds of dogs. Oh my God, I'm still learning them all now.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And so, whatever criteria you bring in, they're either going to be not enough to make a difference, or too many to do the size. Anyway. Thank you, Sally. I enjoyed that enormously. It's 1 minute after 12.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to another story that I told you would be coming around with rather more regularity than it has in the past. And this one it's a sort of hardening of resolve, I think you could probably best describe it as. The idea that the issue, the legacy of slavery, is a horror that needs to be addressed in more substantive and meaningful ways than it has been thus far. So beyond education and information, which of course some people remain opposed to, as a general rule, I don't think it's a good idea to trust people who are opposed to education. So whether it's people who burn books or people who object to National Trust properties publishing information about National Trust properties, or people who don't want you to know about things or don't want your children to know about things, as a general rule, I generally look askance at people who are opposed to the free flow of information. And yet it's not enough for many people when it comes to the question of slavery. And of course, I think one of the main reasons why, whether they realise it or not, people are opposed to education and information in the context of the slave trade is because of how shocking the truth is. I mean, whichever little small shock, or rather which small example of a massive shock you prefer, there are so many jaw-dropping moments in the most cursory examination of the history of the slave trade that you can see why people who perhaps have a little bit too much of their own personal identity tied up in the accident of geography that saw them be born in a certain country, you could not want this to be known. Pretty much all of the wealth which sustained the United Kingdom, sustained Scotland, England, and Wales throughout the glory days, was derived from the slave trade. I mean, so much of our, quotes, achievements, end quotes, were driven by the colonial thirst for more and more money. And therefore, if you have a slightly rose-tinted chocolate box view of Britishness, then you would probably not want the truth about the slave trade to be widely disseminated and known by every child in the United Kingdom. Is it an enemy of patriotism, do you think, for some people? I don't know. But I do know this. The demands for meaningful reparation are growing, and they are growing for two reasons. The first is organisation, and, well, I can speculate on the next bit that I say, but I'm not from the Caribbean, and therefore it would be speculation. But the organisation is going hand in hand with, I would say, the decline of deference. Now, I don't know about this, and I'm going to need your help. So this is a conversation that will be very much Caribbean flavoured. If you're from a Caribbean nation, I am much more interested in your thoughts on this than I am in anybody else's. at the moment. That may change depending on where the conversation takes us. But the organisation is going hand in hand with a decline in deference. And what I mean by a decline in deference is something that you have taught me when we've talked about issues like this in the past. Not specifically this issue. It may actually have been when the King's son, when William and Kate had a bit of a nightmare, didn't they, on a Caribbean tour? And we were trying to work out why on the programme, how they had misjudged, how things had been misjudged so badly. And you explained to me that there would be a generational shift in attitudes to the royal family. So where your grandparents or your parents may have been very loyal subjects, younger generations were looking at the status quo with a little bit more scepticism. And, of course, I think the flow of information is going to be part of that decline in deference. So we've actually got three themes there on issue one. You've got organisation, information, and a decline in deference, which drives demands for compensation, for meaningful reparation. Oh, it all happened last century, it all happened 200 years ago, why are you asking for reparations now? Well, answer, very simply, because the inequality that is endemic in our society, some of its roots go back to the slave trade. Some of its roots go back to the colonies. And the second thing that's driving it, alongside that sort of hat trick of phenomena, the information, organisation and a decline in deference, the second thing that's driving it is the converse. It's actually the number of people whose family tree contains slavers coming forward to publicly repent, if you like, or to publicly apologise. And I'll give you a really good example of that. The former BBC presenter Laura Trevelyan, she is working with, or has at least given a big boost to, the Reparations Commission for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which, I mean, she says herself, my family owned about 1,000 slaves on 5 different sugar plantations in Grenada in the 17th and 18th centuries. When slavery was abolished, our family received compensation. That's one of the jaw droppers that we refer to. That's one of the jaw droppers. Because we boast about abolishing the slave trade, and it's not only racists that do that when they're trying to shut this conversation down. But you show me a racist, and I'll show you someone who claims that we don't need to apologise for the slave trade because we abolished it. We abolished it by giving millions and millions and millions of pounds to the families of slavers. And of course, those fortunes in many cases will still be in play today. That's the difference between really, really rich people and the rest of us. So when I read about Caribbean nations demanding, I phrased that wrong. Caribbean nations making formal demands to the royal family specifically for slavery reparations, what I really want to know is how you, as someone from a Caribbean nation or someone descended from someone from a Caribbean nation, what's your personal relationship with this issue? We are hoping, this is a quote from the Reparations Commission, we are hoping that King Charles will revisit the issue of reparations and make a more profound statement, beginning with an apology, and that he would make resources from the royal family available for what they call reparative justice. This is Ali Gill, who's chairman of the Grenada National Reparations Committee. He should make some money available. We're not saying that he should starve himself and his family, but we're not asking for trinkets. We believe we can sit around a table and discuss what can be made available for reparative justice. I like that phrase, reparative justice. It's 12 minutes after 12. And that's really the question I'd like to ask. As I say, I have no skin in this game at all. I really don't. But I do recognise the history of it. So, for example, the chairman of the Reparation Commission in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, he says accurately that every property that the royal family is in possession of has the scent of slavery. You go back to, I think it was the Duke of York, it was James, Charles II's brother, James, who essentially invented or was one of the very earliest adopters of this practice, and large swathes of the royal family's wealth could be construed as having sprung from this hideous well. There is a temptation among... what's the word I want? I can't keep saying racist. There's a slightly different word that I want. It's an exceptionalist attitude, perhaps. The kind of white person who thinks that they still have the right to tell black people what they should and shouldn't do. You know, that the idea that you are not descended from a Caribbean nation, but you will tell the people who are why they should just go away and shut up, as Gavin Williamson might say. Well, maybe it is just racist, actually. I try too hard sometimes to be nice. Maybe if you are a white person who thinks that black people should just be quiet and shut up about their centuries-old grievances, it is coming from a place of racism. Maybe not. It's something we can talk about, something we can explore a little further. But the fundamental question I have for you is what difference it would make to you personally. Because that seems to me to be the acid test of this whole idea. And I'm not coming from a place of scepticism, but I'm coming from a place of ignorance. I can't quite conceive of what difference it would make to you personally. So to learn that you are descended from slaves and that the royal family's wealth is descended from slaving, would a transfer of assets from the royal family to your island of origin, would it mean something to you? What difference would it make? Is that a fair question to ask? I think it is. I'm fascinated to hear your answer, but of course, as I say, because I have no skin in the game, I may be missing a point or barking up entirely the wrong tree. I would love to know. And you may not have given it much thought before, but if the commissions are in existence and people like Ali Gill are making these very powerful arguments, then clearly a lot of people are having this internal conversation. A lot of people are thinking about this. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are. So here is the royal family. It was even called the Royal African Company, enslaved and transported hundreds of thousands of people from Africa to the Americas, which of course belonged to us at the time. So neck deep in it, frankly. Here is the royal family with wealth derived, still epic wealth, derived in part from slaving. And here is your island of origin, here is your family history, your family tree, and there are slaves on it. How do merging these two historical facts together, what I just want you to tell me in your own words the difference that it makes to you. 0345 6060 973. Maybe I should tell you why. Because I want to be better at understanding this. I just want to have... So I've got the sense of natural justice being served by reparations, the sense that it addresses a historical injustice. But that's abstract. That's overview territory. I really would love to hear about the internal improvement, the difference it would make almost to your sense of self, to see that historical injustice being in some way acknowledged and atoned for. And I don't know that you can atone for it with just words. Maybe you think you can. Maybe you're not interested in the money, but you want something else entirely. 0345 6060 973. It's funny. Simon suggests, I think the word you're looking for is imperialist rather than racist, whereas Elizabeth, in response to exactly the same question, replies, the word you're looking for is superior, James. They think they're superior. I think imperialism involves, doesn't it, a basic presumption of superiority. You've got, superiority or greed. It's usually both, but I don't know. So there it is. If not money, then what? 0345 6060 973. And what would it mean to you to see the royal family publicly and financially atone for their role, their ancestors' role in the enslavement of your ancestors? It's 12:17. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. And if you hit those numbers now, well, you know the rest.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
Madness. I'm just reading about complaints about people waving flags at the last night of the proms. And that really is part of the context of any conversation about slavery and reparations, because you can be absolutely certain that the people attacking the BBC for having their cameras on when members of the audience at the last night of the proms started waving European Union flags are pretty much certain to be precisely the sort of people who think that any form of reparations regarding slavery are absolutely ridiculous. And I'll leave you to work out what the linking theme might be. Joseph's in Swindon. Joseph, what would you like to say?
Hi, Joe. Hi, James. James, what I like to say, Prince, the idea I had about what would it mean to me?
Yes.
For some form of reparation. I think we do need some form of reparation, but what we need, or what will help the Caribbean going forward. What I looked at, I don't think individual people coming up and giving some compensation and doing here and there for certain islands. What the English government could do on a whole is to give the Caribbean islands, British Caribbean islands, a free trade agreement. That will make a big difference for the economy in the Caribbean islands.
What's in place at the moment?
Well, since you joined after we get independence, you took away all the rights we had, freedom of movement, the trading. And if you will give us back that, I think education-wise, making your university accessible to descendants of slaves, so that we could in the future, so we could move on in the future. We're not looking for money or give back us, but you give us a way to have a future. At the moment, you took away the way of having a future. It becomes very, very difficult. It's very, very hard.
I mean, talking about Jamaica, Barbados, the Dominican Republic. So I'd forgotten about the distinction between the fully independent and the not independent. So I suppose if I was the devil's advocate, I'd point out, well, hang on, you wanted independence, and now you don't.
Yeah, because we wanted independence because we wanted self-rule.
Yes.
What we wanted was a DC. We wanted independence because we wanted some form of self-rule and self-governance. We have that set up in the Caribbean, but what we do not have is the economic clout, because we never get that. We never, as Scotland now independence. If Scotland wants to get independence, they will ask for some sort of the sovereign wealth.
There's a sort of legacy, isn't there? There's some sort of... that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Where are you from?
I'm from Grenada.
You're from Grenada. And so what would a free trade deal look like? How would it help?
Because if I go back to you, after they had the agricultural economy in the Windward Islands, which was like cocoa, nutmeg, and banana, that get decimated because we could no longer sell. We had to compete with the world in selling these things to England. Before independence, we had a free trade agreement. We had preferential treatment.
I had no idea. Every day's a school day, Joseph. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, so when that gets taken away, that industry in the Caribbean become... If you go back to the Caribbean...
This was one of the non sort of mad Brexit arguments, wasn't it? Would be that Commonwealth countries or former Commonwealth countries would see enhanced trade with the United Kingdom after Brexit, because presumably part of the reason for the decline you described would have been European Union membership and World Trade Organization rules, meaning we can't offer preferential terms to anybody. But now we're no longer European Union members. We could sign a free trade agreement with...
But that wasn't true, James, because the French offer it to all the French islands. So all the French islands in the Caribbean...
So it was just... there you go. So it was a bogus Brexit argument then, rather than a bigoted one. We didn't need to leave the European islands. I'm always looking for...
Because the French did offer that to their territory.
But there's no reparation. There's no reparatory element to this then, because it would be of mutual benefit. And to be honest with you, Joseph, this lot will sign a free trade agreement with anybody if it means that Kemi Badenoch can spend 10 minutes pretending that it makes a meaningful contribution to filling the hole left by Brexit. So there's no reparatory element to what you describe, really. It would be good for both parties.
It would be good, because I don't think the Caribbean islands is asking for a handout. What we need is for the British to acknowledge what they have done.
Yes.
To me and my descendants, or my foreparents before me, and what they'll be doing, the harm they will have caused to my descendants before me. after my descendant. So they have
I know,
to
I understand.
that.
Forebears. Antecedents, I think, is that.
And they have to understand that, and then give us something by which we could make a way in the future.
No, fair enough. And specific to the royal family, you're not bothered about that?
Well, if the royal family choose to contribute to, like, let's say, giving scholarship to, because we give scholarships to some of the island students, and stuff like. If they choose to do that, that would be something. That would benefit the country in general. So if they choose to do stuff like that, I could understand that. But individual people just coming forward and saying, "Yeah, my foreparents was this, and I'm going to give a token of appreciation," I think the British government could go much farther. And
yes, but
that.
You don't want. It's not either or, is it? I mean, ideally, you'd have both. I think it's right for people like, or it's right for her. I'm glad she did it for people like Laura Trevelyan and her family to come forward with donations and apologies. But you're talking about something that reaches a little further, I suppose. I hadn't thought of that. And I think it's true. I mean, the reason why Kemi Badenoch can't really put the boot into China at the moment, despite the fact that there is an alleged Chinese spy in the very heart of the House of Commons, is because we're so desperate for the trade after imposing economic sanctions on ourselves. David is in Maida Vale. David, thank you, Joseph. That's a perfect start. David, what would you like to say?
Yeah, to be honest, James, this is a long, drawn-out conversation over years. I sit down with friends, family, and talk about this. At the end of the day, part of what the gentleman just said is correct, but the other half of what he said is also the problem. At the end of the day, to hell with this cap in hand kind of attitude. If, tomorrow the UK government, whoever came along and said, okay, 200 grand to every, black person affected, et cetera, by the end of next year, that money will be gone. Do you understand what I'm saying? That money will be gone. So we're wasting our time. What we have to speak about here, it's a legacy of removing history, removing right to property, removing land, these sort of things. I'm Jamaican by birth, and you look at the situation in the Caribbean as a whole, and you have a prime minister, for example, in the form of Andrew Holness. And to be honest, it's a crazy one because I didn't realize this guy actually was my next door neighbor when I was a little kid in Jamaica.
Gosh.
He lived two doors down from me.
You're not going to libel him, are you?
No.
Carry on.
So with this in mind, I look at the situation. Now, you go onto Wikipedia,
Yeah.
You look at this and you look at Andrew Holness appointed by the Governor General.
Right.
Who is the Governor General? Another dude who reports to King Charles. Yeah. It says so, not just on Wikipedia. It's the fact. So if you look at a leader of Jamaica and he's appointed, so what does that mean? He's supposed to be elected, but he's appointed. So without going down that rabbit hole, I'm making my point.
Yes, you are. Are you sure it's a? I mean, is there not an election?
So there is an election.
Yeah, well, the Prime Minister is appointed.
Hold on.
I'm holding.
James,
I'm here.
You also have every year probably about 10 shipping containers worth of firearms shipped into Jamaica every year to kind of facilitate election to and froing, shall we say?
Okay.
So let's not get into that.
No,
we don't send the guns there. Someone does, and Jamaicans can't afford those guns like that in their hand. Anyhow. The point, what I'm trying to say is, you go then back to the situation of tracing the history of slavery, i.e. the slave register. The slave register is held at Kew, the National Archives over in Kew, down by Richmond there,
Yeah.
When you go online to actually, as a black person, looking to trace your history of, going back to slavery, the mid-1800s, you find that you run straight into a brick wall as soon as you hit somewhere about 1840, that sort of way. Then you look at how they hold the records down there. It's basically they've taken a photo of a handwritten page.
Right.
Now, you look at anyone else's history from a manuscript perspective, it is translated and typed out digitally.
Okay.
So part of the reason why black people cannot trace their history beyond slavery and into slavery in order to ascertain who was responsible for their enslavement is because there's this drag your feet attitude.
You have to be there in person.
The
you can't do it online. You
can see it online, but you're reading autographs all day.
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to trace back to find out any sort of?
Well, this is about impetus, isn't it? This is about the appetite for change, and if the appetite for change is not going to be coming from the oppressors or the oppressive party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say to you, sorry, James, let me make another couple points. Number one,
I'm a bit late for the news, but I feel that you're in your prime now, David. So I'll give you another minute or two.
Yeah, what I'm saying is people who's affected by this need to cut the cat-in-hand rubbish, yeah?
Yeah.
We need to start to look at who the leaders are in these countries, these black countries, start to fish them out, because you'll find that their allegiance is not to the country. It is to some person that's sitting in a European country pulling the strings.
That's deference. There's still a legacy of deference, a legacy of knowing your place. And that's what I meant at the outset when I talked about generational change. And the younger generations are much less likely to engage in the forelock tugging or the cap doffing than their parents or their grandparents were. So what about specifically and briefly the royal family paying money to Caribbean nations?
If the royal family is found to have been involved actively in
categorically
slavery,
was. Categorically.
If you notice, I've used the word certainly there needs to be some sort of recognition by them,
so?
And no, I'm not saying forcefully or any kind of disrespectful situation, but I'm saying it's only fair and right, even to their own reputation, to lead by example, to say, look, we haven't got a time machine to turn the clocks back, but certainly the now generation of royals will move forward in recognition of what the wrongs have been done in the past. At the end of the day, me as a person of colour, or a man of colour, because person is a corporate term, a man of colour, I do not want to hold anyone like that to any kind of disrespectful situation. The point being, we just must move forward with a positive attitude.
Yeah.
They can talk about it however they want behind the scenes, when in their own privacy, but publicly, certainly, it's helpful to their own.
Yes, you'd think so, wouldn't you? You'd almost feel. I mean, I know the King of Holland has done that. The Dutch King has done that and spoken about the weight of the words, feeling the weight of the words in my heart and my soul. And you sort of, I know King Charles spoke about sorrow, but didn't go so far as an apology, a party. There should be. I mean, if it was your great-great-great-great-granddad, there should be something you feel in your bones about it, and that is what you should be communicating to the world and to people. David, thank you. I mentioned I was late for the news. It is 12:32. Lottie Morley is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:36, and open up a little wider now. In thing we haven't done before, actually. I usually rely on Idiot's Corner for this, or some of the harder of thinking contributions to my inbox. But the opposition to this, I mean, it seems to me to be such a simple case of natural justice being served. Here are some people that, I think someone sent me a message, I'll dig it out in a minute. I think that the youngest, here you go, the last American slave died in 1971. The last child of a slave, Daniel Smith, died last year. The last slave owners, this is in America, died in the 1950s. It's in America, but it is the slavery that essentially we invented, the Royal African Company in particular, transporting hundreds of thousands from Africa to the Americas. So, I understand where the racism comes from, and I understand where it leads. That's where you get your, what about the Romans, or some absolute hogwash like that. And there's a brilliant Irish librarian, actually, whose name temporarily eludes me, but I follow him on Twitter, and he's superb on debunking the idea that addressing the slave trade somehow, the Irish experience somehow equates to the black experience or the Caribbean experience or the African experience. It spoiler alert, it just doesn't. But obviously people desperate to denigrate or diminish the Holocaust of slavery like to pretend that it also happened to Irish people as well. So what drives the scepticism? So I read about Laura Trevelyan, I read about descendants of William Gladstone, I read about the royal family, I read about the Royal African Company in particular, and then I read about Caribbean nations in 2023 making formal requests. It's funny, isn't it? The Daily Mail wrote demands, and that's the word I've been using. But you could say requests, and the story changes slightly, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Caribbean nations will make formal requests to the royal family for slavery reparations by the end of the year. Or Caribbean nations will make formal demands. And then, of course, the headline becomes, now King faces cash demands over slavery. It sounds like they're holding him hostage. It sounds like they're trying to blackmail him. If you simply wrote Caribbean nations ask for reparations, it's got a very different flavour for King faces cash demands over slavery. So where does that come from? Where does that implicit Daily Mail prejudice come from? Where does the idea that I use very loosely, should not be atoning for slavery? And atoning is different to apologising. Atoning is an act. An apology is talking. It might be completely sincere, but where does it come from, this reluctance to atone? The kind of people who, if you like, would argue that this is something that does not need to be done. I guess what I'm asking is there a rationale in place there that won't sound either imperialist, colonialist, or racist? Because if there is, I would actually quite like to hear it. So I am opposed to reparations and apologies and atonement. I am opposed to all of these things because, and then the words that follow the because there don't sound as if they're born of a belief in colonialism, imperialism or racism. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And then, of course, the broader question of what it means to you. What would it mean to you as a descendant from a Caribbean background? What would it mean to you if the royal family did stump up some cash? Mark's in Halton Heath. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi. I'm definitely for reparations. My family, unfortunately, in 1623, 400 years ago, were the first settlers of the West Indies, using bond slaves from Ireland. They wiped out the native Caribs, and then they were stuck for workers. So his son started the whole triangular.
How did you find this out? Did you always know this?
Yeah, virtually. It's in the family history, but the attitude to it definitely in this side of the family has changed. But about a few years ago, we made a program on Sky.
Oh yeah.
It was called "So You Think You're Royal." That was irrelevant. It was to do with our connection.
Yes.
And I got comments from a lot of members from my family that, what difference can we make? Why are we going to the past? What counts now isn't that. Right. And I had quite heated arguments.
Where do you think they were coming from on that? What do you think their motive? So I think I understand your motivation. It could be filed largely under a sense of natural justice or a desire for natural justice, and it doesn't matter how long ago it happened. If it was wrong, it should be addressed and atoned for. Your family members who are more sceptical about that, what drives them, do you think?
Why stir up the past, I suppose. They were proud of this history, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
And I am not. And when the BBC interviewed at the end of the commemoration of the ending of the slave trade, they came and interviewed me for their website.
Right.
They also tried to interview Richard Drax, who refused, because all around here in Dorset are his estates, and they're all paid for by the slave trade.
Well, he's still got a big estate in Barbados, I think, as well.
That's right, but he only stopped receiving reparations within the last 20 years, I think.
This is I think the money that the government borrowed to pay his ancestors reparations only got paid back within the last 20 years. I think the flow of money from government to descendants of slavers was self-contained at the time of compensation, I think.
Okay, but I bow to your wisdom.
It's not wisdom.
Rich,
I could easily be wrong, but I think that and that then is part of it. Then it's hang on a minute. Reparations involves me giving up something that I've currently got, and that's really easy to understand.
Well, I only live in a small bungalow.
So you're in favour of reparations because you won't have to pay anything back.
Well, no, what could I do? Yes. And I felt, after making this programme for Sky,
yes,
I was looking for, I'm a Baptist minister, but I was looking for a new role.
Okay.
And I worked for the Sailor Society, looking after the merchant seafarers of the world who live in almost slave conditions, the Filipinos,
is that right?
For months and months and months on end without seeing their families. And I felt this is one way that I could be making a bit of an atonement.
Yes. And it's not either or, of course, because some people would say, why are we bothering with reparations when there is still modern-day slavery? But again, that's a cop-out. You can easily address both. You can easily address both.
Yeah.
Crikey.
But I just feel it will... I mean, it was in the law that we took from these countries. It was commissioned by King James I, my ancestor was, and it was in the law of all these governors and uber governors in the West Indies. And I feel it should be in the law that reparations are made, that it shouldn't be the generosity of the royal family or the Lascelles or any other rich families. It should be in law. That
would be British legislation, though, wouldn't it? It
would be. It would be.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't really argue with anything that you say. I'm surprised the Barbadian government can't do more. I know Mia Motley has tried. She's certainly spoken about it, hasn't she? She's tried to. But they last time I checked, and I think this was November of last year, they were looking at legal requirements, but they could only do that at the other end of the
but this whole
traffic.
Deference thing was still there. That's a couple of years after I made this television programme. We went to the West Indies as a chaplain on a cruise.
Yes.
And we got there and met a load of black Warners who were relations of ours, but they were still looking out the window of the taxi saying, I've got a white Warner on board. You know, this sort of deference, which makes me cry, really.
Well, of course it does. And it's been inculcated very, very, very deliberately over decades, if not centuries. Mark, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Taking me right up to the wire as well. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:48 is the time. Aaron is in Crystal Palace. When you listen to people making arguments against reparations, it's not long before you start to detect the itching and prickings of guilty consciences mixed with self-preservation. You're right, Aaron, but you also have a kind of weird form of deference, which would be poor or not particularly wealthy British people galloping to the defence of extremely wealthy British people who wouldn't urinate on them if they were on fire. Let me see if I can find any examples of that. Here's one from Sam. Should the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. of every murderer atone for the sins of their forefathers? Ridiculous. No, Sam, but the descendants of slavers who are still in possession of epic fortunes derived from slavery should give some of it back to countries whence slaves were traded. I hope that helps. I'm surprised you went to the trouble of writing that down. I would have thought as the letters appeared on the phone in front of you, you'd have realised how stupid you were being. And speaking of stupid, here's John in Hawley. I'm against reparation. Where do you draw the line? Africa chiefs who sold to Saud, who sold to the English, Romans who sold Brits into slavery, Vikings, who else? No, you don't have to pay reparation. I mean, who would pay those reparations? Again, you find fortunes in this country built upon the slave trade. And traceable names, actual traceable names. The plantation in Barbados is called Drax Hall, I think. You can find these people. The royal family have got a pretty rich archive, John, mate. If you want to find out what the royal family is, quite straightforward. There's even paintings of them in the National Portrait Gallery. It's not mysterious. You tell me the names of the Vikings that you're talking about and where their descendants are today, and you might have 10% of an intelligent point. But you don't. So you don't. On your crack. Logan's in Perth. Logan, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Logan.
I'm from New Zealand. This is my 6th day in the UK.
Welcome. Crikey.
Thank you. Our foundational document in New Zealand is the Treaty of Waitangi, which is the agreement between the British Crown and the Māori people of New Zealand.
I didn't know that.
We've paid quite a bit of reparations to the individual iwi or tribes in New Zealand. Basically, what is a legal document. Funnily enough, what the English version and the Māori version say are two very different things. But they've come to realise that, the British, the Crown, as it's referred to, the New Zealand sort of government, didn't fulfil their end of the bargain. And they have actually come to the point of paying out reparations to quite a bit to these individual tribes. So in some way, shape or form, the Crown has paid out reparations, at least in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's not widely reported here, that.
No, funny that. I do love your show.
Thank you.
Never had a chance to call in.
No, well, I'm delighted that you had. And I mean, you and I can only speculate upon the impact that has had on the recompensed communities. But I mean, presumably it's been a net positive.
Well, we celebrate it in a way. Like Māori culture is celebrated in New Zealand. I'm currently wearing my I work for the YMCA in New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a jersey on at the moment that says investing in the next generation. Underneath that is the Māori translation of that. I work with kids who are, for lack of a better term, unsuitable for mainstream education. And we sort of acknowledge that, whereas the mainstream sort of education, dare I say it, but the colonial education system doesn't work for everyone. But by working this stuff into our way of doing things, people are really getting into wanting to know how to speak Te Reo, the Māori language.
Right.
I've got a bone carving on that my grandfather made. I'm as European as we come in New Zealand. Most of us don't really know which particular country in Europe we come from, but it's celebrated.
So there's well, that's a beautiful example to follow and pertinent as well, for as you point out, because of the links to the Crown. That's absolutely fascinating. That is on my list, along with Mark in Dorset's family history. That's on my list of things to find out a little bit more about before we return to this conversational territory in the future. How long are you in the UK for, Logan?
I've got another couple of weeks.
Okay.
Currently sitting in the car park of Hermitage, just been up for a walk.
Lovely stuff.
Loving it.
I hope you enjoyed the stay. I really do. You've got us at our best, actually, weather-wise, but it won't last. 12:53 is the time. 0345. Well, actually, I don't. Well, I'll tell you the number anyway because I'm polite. 0345 606 0973. But unless you've got an absolute humdinger of a story, you're unlikely to get on air. Adam is in Luton. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. Hope you're well.
Very well.
Last time I think I spoke to you, we spoke about Barbados, so I'm glad you know me and Motley and all that, so it's really cool to know you.
Every day's a school day, I try.
Yeah, so just some ideas I thought for reparations, because I know that it won't actually, you can't put a price on people's lives financially now, and also, no matter what we do, there will always be some sort of contention, some sort of like opposition. So I just think something that could be done, but also try and bring us together.
Yes.
Is if there was like a Prince's Trust, a scholarship that actually allowed people from the diaspora to go back to somewhere in West Africa. Again, we wouldn't know specifically, but just some sort of like summer camp, just so people know that we are anchored somewhere. Because, if you are Caribbean, like one of your callers said earlier, we actually were put there and we killed off the Caribs. So we're not actually from there. I think that a lot of people don't understand, or they do understand.
It was essentially a trading post in humans, wasn't it? So they both came from and went to somewhere, but then of course many stayed to work on the plantations as well. It's tricky.
Because I know, like my best friend's Jewish. Well, was my best friend, and they go for a summer camp. Well, they went for a summer camp while we were in high school, and they came back and they had this like
You mean a kibbutz,
for,
I think. Would it be a kibbutz? Is that how it worked, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's like just Jewish camp. I know like a lot of Americans do it too, but she went over to Israel and she learnt the language and she met people. She actually came back and became more religious.
Yeah, okay.
Because she actually found herself as part of a community and actually realised that she was proud of who she was. And I just think for some of us, it would be really cool if we could have that. And also, I thought another idea that I think is quite cool is like Ghana is doing something called did something called Year of the Return, where they ask people from the diaspora to just come back, and they have given people like from Barbados like a freedom of movement essentially, so we can just go there. And I just think if there could be some sort of like scholarship either for
I hear that. I mean, again, it's not. It doesn't have to be to the exclusion of other things, because someone who is very old could almost feel the fingers of history on their shoulder. I'm talking about the American fellow who only died last year, who was the child of an owned human being, an enslaved human being. So I think you'd need to address the other end of the generational spectrum as well. But in terms of legacy and future, then focusing on the young is a wonderful idea, actually, and then you sort of change a mindset really for future generations. Adam, thank you. 12:56 is the time, and Freddie is in Feltham. Freddie, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Freddie.
Long-time listener, first time getting through.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
Better
late than never.
Agreed. I'll try and make this quick. I don't know where to start with this. But I would like to say you touched on important points. It's not what you say, but how you say it.
Yes.
Communication and education is important. For example, apology and atonement.
Yes.
Very similar, but you're rightfully so, very different words. Now, reparations, if a wrong was done, obviously a wrong was done, then yes, that needs to be addressed and atonement needs to happen. But we need to make sure all the education is in the right place and all the communication is in the right place. For example, well, I agree with was it your Grenadian caller earlier, said something about the trade agreement. We don't necessarily want it in the form, I'm Dominican raised, by the way, I grew up there. We don't necessarily want it in the form of cash payment, but in helping with industry. He mentioned agricultural preferential treatment with the Windward Islands. I don't think that was necessarily killed off because of independence, because I'm an 80s baby and it was still going on there well into the 90s, but I think it's because of the American companies, i.e. Dole Bananas.
Right.
But I'll let your research team get into that. The point I'm
research team.
Well, they're much better financed than me. Like
Yeah.
I said, we just need to make sure all the right words are
But
in
it's
the right
appetite.
place.
You need the appetite there first. The appetite for change,
Exactly.
the appetite for reparation. Call it whatever you prefer. That brings us to the obstacle of resistance and the people in this country, many of whom occupy enormous positions of power and influence, who have a knee-jerk objection to the very idea of any form of reparation, which you have to presume is born of fear and guilt and possibly second-hand shame. Freddie, you've taken me right up to the wire. I'm sorry we can't talk for longer, especially because you've waited so long for your debut, but I hope we'll talk again. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can rewind live radio or enjoy the whole show podcast. You'll also find all of LBC's shows there to catch up on, as well as all of our live radio stations, including, of course, Capital FM, where Roman Kemp plies his trade, and Roman dropped by earlier. Rewind live radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.